the virtual equivalent of someone tripping up as they come to the stage. So please bear with us if there are the occasional glitches. But as I say, with a magnificent technical team behind the scenes, we'll try and keep things as smooth as possible. So as I say, welcome to the event, and we're going to kick off with a Vision 2050 video. Well, the man who's helped pull this report together is Peter Backer from the WBCSD. And we're going to hear from Peter very, very shortly. We're going to have a discussion first of all, we're going to have a discussion a little later. But first of all, Peter, I know you've got a few introductory remarks, and I just want to reiterate that you have really pulled together a powerful piece of work here.
Thank you very much, Tom, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're actually quite excited to launch Vision 2050, Time to Transform today. More than 2 years of work with over 40 global companies helping us have put this report together. What I want to do today is talk about three things. First, why this report and why now? Secondly, give you some of the key messages coming out of that report. And thirdly, so what? You know, if you're a business leader, you get a report like this on your desk, what are you going to do next? So here's the why. You know, sustainability is really going mainstream. We know it's become a rather complicated topic, and in this Vision 2050 report, we want to bring back the focus on what truly matters. As Tom said, there are three global challenges that we all need to face up to: the climate emergency, the loss of nature, and the mounting inequality. In climate, we know that the world has 8 more years of today's emissions before we'll move across the 1.5 degrees of warming, which is the boundary for the safe operating space for humanity. If we want to stay below 1.5 degrees, we need to halve the global emissions by 2030 and be at net zero by no later than 2050. Nature, of course, talks about the accelerating extinction of species, both plants and animals. We in this report clarify that the world's GDP is for over 50% dependent on the services that nature provides. And then mounting inequality, it's now a world where 1% of the people own 44% of wealth, where 10 people on the planet have gained $500 billion of wealth during the pandemic, while an additional 160 million people have been pushed into extreme poverty. COVID has made a number of things clear. First, these big challenges, climate, nature, inequality, are completely interconnected. Secondly, it has shown us that the systems that we operate in the world are very ill prepared for the shocks that a pandemic and later on climate or nature may bring to our systems. So we believe we need a common vision. The common vision is that 9+ billion people living well within the boundaries of the planet by mid-century. And this is not just a collection of simple words. This is real deep work with scientists and experts from around the world. So 9+ billion people indicate that we're expecting 2 more billion people to join the planet by mid-century, compared to the 7-point-something we have today. Living well means we need to respect the dignity and the human rights of all. We need to make sure that basic needs are met, and we need to provide equal opportunities to all. The planetary boundaries refers to the planetary boundary framework that science has been developing over the last decades. Obviously, we need to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming. We need to restore nature and use it sustainably. We need to make sure that the Earth system is resilient. So how do you move from the challenges we have today to the vision we have for 2050? That's going to require system change. Everybody in sustainability these days talks about system transformation. But our report, Time to Transform, really pushes beyond just words. It defines what system transformation is, how it happens, which macro trends, innovations, and enablers make it possible. In simple terms, it's about profound change at root cause level. It requires new ways of acting, new ways of thinking. And that's not where we stop. We work with member companies, with business, and business wants to act. So we've actually added 9 transformation pathways to move from where we are today to our vision for 2050. These 9 transformation pathways are there for the business activity areas that are most essential to society. They range from energy to food, from mobility to living spaces, health and well-being, connection, and a few more. For each of these pathways, we have identified what is the vision, what are the key transitions that we need to put in place in the coming decades, and most importantly, what are the 10 action areas that every company in those spaces should implement between 2020 and 2030, making this an actionable framework for businesses to take the lead in the transformations that the world needs. The risk of 9 transformation pathways is that this sounds like an engineering job, that all we need to identify what's the problem, what's the solution, and the engineers will work it out.
Wilayah Asia Pasifik telah lama menikmati manfaat dari kebijakan pro-pertumbuhan, investasi asing, dan tenaga kerja yang kuat. Jutaan orang telah dientaskan dari kemiskinan. Namun pencapaian tersebut diperoleh dengan harga mahal, terutama dalam hal hak asasi manusia. Di beberapa negara, pertumbuhan ekonomi disertai pelanggaran HAM yang signifikan oleh operasi bisnis. Di masa lalu, tanggung jawab untuk mengatasi pelanggaran HAM oleh operasi bisnis menjadi subjek perdebatan tajam. Semua ini berubah di tahun 2011 dengan diperkenalkannya prinsip-prinsip panduan PBB tentang bisnis dan hak asasi manusia yang diadopsi dengan suara bulat oleh Dewan Hak Asasi Manusia. Prinsip-prinsip panduan ini menyediakan kerangka kerja untuk mengatasi dan meningkatkan standar HAM di sektor bisnis. Prinsip-prinsip ini mendefinisikan tanggung jawab negara untuk melindungi HAM dalam operasi bisnis, tanggung jawab bisnis untuk menghormati HAM, dan tanggung jawab keduanya melakukan pemulihan ketika terjadi pelanggaran. Prinsip-prinsip panduan ini menyediakan jalan bagi bisnis untuk berkontribusi terhadap Agenda 2030 dan 17 tujuan pembangunan berkelanjutan. Misalnya, kebijakan anti-diskriminasi di tempat kerja yang mendorong kesetaraan gender dan memberdayakan wanita, mendukung SDG 5. Pemantauan dan audit rantai pasok untuk memberantas kerja paksa. Sebagai akibatnya, bisnis menciptakan kesempatan kerja yang bagus dan membantu pertumbuhan ekonomi, mendukung SDG 8. Dengan membentuk mekanisme keluhan dan sistem pengaduan untuk menghormati hak, bisnis mencegah agar perselisihan tidak berubah menjadi krisis dan konflik, hal mana berkontribusi terhadap SDG 16. UNDP berfokus mempromosikan prinsip-prinsip panduan PBB dengan menyediakan nasihat teknis kepada pemerintah, mengembangkan kebijakan, proses uji kelayakan, dan pemulihan bagi bisnis, dan mendukung organisasi masyarakat sipil, serta pembela hak asasi manusia untuk meningkatkan akuntabilitas. UNDP memperkuat baik bisnis maupun hak asasi manusia untuk mendorong masa depan yang berkelanjutan.
The Asia-Pacific region has long benefited from pro-growth policies foreign investment, and a strong labor force. Millions of people have been lifted out of poverty, but the gains have come at a cost, especially for human rights. In some countries, economic growth has been accompanied by significant human rights abuses by business operations. In the past, responsibility for addressing human rights abuses by business operations has been the subject of fierce debates. All that changed in 2011 with the introduction of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights that were unanimously adopted by the Human Rights Council. The Guiding Principles provide a framework to address and improve human rights standards in the business sector. They define the state's duty to protect human rights in business operations, a business's responsibility to respect human rights, and for both to provide remedies for when violations occur. The Guiding Principles provide a way for businesses to contribute to the 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. For example, anti-discrimination policies at the workplace that boost gender equality and empower women in support of SDG 5. Monitoring and auditing of supply chains to eradicate forced labor. As a result, businesses create good work opportunities and support economic growth in support of SDG 8. As businesses set up grievance mechanisms and complaint systems to respect rights, they prevent disputes from turning into crises and conflicts, contributing to SDG 16. UNDP is focused on promoting the UN's guiding principles by providing technical advice to governments, developing policies, due diligence processes and remedies for businesses, and supporting civil society organizations and human rights defenders to improve accountability. UNDP is strengthening both businesses and human rights to promote a sustainable future. The Asia-Pacific region has long benefited from pro-growth policies, foreign investment, and a strong labor force. Millions of people have been lifted out of poverty, but the gains have come at a cost, especially for human rights. In some countries, economic growth has been accompanied by significant human rights abuses by business operations. In the past, responsibility for addressing human rights abuses by business operations has been the subject of fierce debates. All that changed in 2011 with the introduction of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights that were unanimously adopted by the Human Rights Council. The Guiding Principles provide a framework to address and improve human rights standards in the business sector. They define the state's duty to protect human rights in business operations, a business's responsibility to respect human rights, and for both to provide remedies for when violations occur. The Guiding Principles provide a way for businesses to contribute to the 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. For example, anti-discrimination policies at the workplace that boost gender equality and empower women in support of SDG 5. Monitoring and auditing of supply
Excellencies, distinguished speakers and participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to greet everyone for a delightful Wednesday morning. I am pleased to welcome you to the virtual CEO Forum, Responsible Business in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. This session is a form of initiation between Kadin Indonesia with the Indonesian Business Council for Sustainable Development IBCSD and the United Nations Development Programme UNDP. Today's event is also a kick-off organized as roundtable discussions for CEOs and high-level management of Indonesian enterprises to explore the impact of the increasing momentum of the business, human rights narrative on business strategies, and operations and share good practices for conducting human rights due diligence. It will serve as a precursor of a practical training on human rights due diligence for business participants in functional leaders law. The virtual CEO Forum aims to enhance knowledge and understanding on business and human rights issues among the business community in Indonesia, strengthen business leadership, and collective actions to support the business and human rights agenda in Indonesia, and promote the business case for adopting human rights due diligence. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my delight to be your master of ceremony today. My name is Indita from the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We highly appreciate for taking time to join us today. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, allow me to greet our speakers, Mr. Arsyad Rashid, Chairman of Indonesia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, His Excellency, Mr. Yasona Lawli, Minister of Law and Human Rights of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency, Mr. Vincent Pick, European Union Ambassador to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, Ms. Sophie Kemkatz, Deputy Resident Representative UNDP Indonesia, Mr. Livio Sandrareo, Business and Human Rights Advisor UNDP, Mr. Yono Reksoprojo, VP Corporate Affairs Sintesa Group, Executive Committee Member of Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development, Ms. Ana Patricia Sutanto, Vice CEO PT Pan Brothers Tbk, Ms. Evi Yulin, President Director PT Mix Tbk, Ms. Sarah Noviani, Sustainability Compliance Head Asia Pulp and Paper Sinarmas, and a warm welcome to our moderator who will lead the panel discussion today, Ms. Desi Anwar. Ladies and gentlemen, today's session is conducted in English and Bahasa Indonesia. Simultaneous translation from Bahasa Indonesia to English is available. For those who are online from their computer or notebook, please click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, choose English or Indonesia based on your preference, and tick the option of mute original speaker. English interpretation will be only available when the speaker speaks in Bahasa Indonesia and vice versa. Distinguished guests and participants, now without any further ado, please welcome Mr. Arsyad Rashid from Kadin Indonesia to give the welcoming remarks. May I ask the host to maybe play the video, or thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan dan salam sehat untuk semua. Yang terhormat Bapak Yasona Lawli, Menteri Hukum dan Hak Asasi Manusia Republik Indonesia. Yang terhormat Ibu Sophie Kemhazi, Deputy Resident Representative daripada UNDP Indonesia. Yang terhormat High Excellency Vincent Pickett, Duta Besar EU untuk Indonesia dan Brunei Darussalam. Yang terhormat para panelis Mr. Levio Sarendria, Business and Human Rights Advisor for UNDP, Ibu Sinta Kamdani, Wakil Ketua Umum Koordinator Kadin Indonesia, Ibu Ana Patricia Sutanto, Vice CEO of PT Pen Brothers Tbk, Ibu Elin Sritaba, Chief Sustainability Officer, Asia Pulp and Paper, Sinarmas, Ibu Evi Yulin, Presiden Direktur PT Merck Tbk, Bapak Ibu semua, peserta CEO Forum yang saya hormati. Hampir 2 tahun kita berhadapan dengan pandemi COVID-19. Tsunami kesehatan ini telah mempengaruhi semua aspek kehidupan masyarakat, termasuk ekonomi global, sosial, dunia industri, juga lapangan pekerjaan. Di Indonesia sendiri, pemerintah dengan seluruh elemen masyarakat bergotong royong menahan laju penyebaran COVID-19 ini. Dalam situasi ini, Kadin Indonesia serta mengambil peran aktif membantu pemerintah dengan menyerukan gerakan perang melawan pandemi. Gerakan ini bertumpu pada 3 medan pertempuran, mulai dari perang kesehatan, perang sosial, dan juga perang ekonomi. Adanya diskusi ini adalah salah satu upaya untuk menghadapi perang tersebut melalui peningkatan penyerapan uji tuntas hak asasi manusia dan integrasi pertimbangan bisnis dan hak asasi manusia ke dalam praktik bisnis. Kamar Dagang dan Industri Indonesia, Kadin, bekerjasama dengan Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development dan United Nations Development Programs UNDP mengadakan CEO Forum tentang Responsible Business in the Time of the COVID-19 Pandemic and Beyond. Acara ini akan diselenggarakan sebagai diskusi meja bundar untuk CEO dan manajemen tingkat tinggi perusahaan Indonesia untuk mengeksplorasi dampak dari meningkatnya momentum narasi bisnis dan hak asasi manusia pada strategi dan operasi bisnis, serta berbagi praktik, baik untuk melakukan uji tuntas hak asasi manusia or Human Rights Due Diligence or HRDD. Forum ini akan menjadi awal dari pelatihan 4 hari tentang HRDD untuk bisnis yang beroperasi di Indonesia. Organisasi Buruh Internasional atau ILO pada April 22 mencatat bahwa upaya penanganan COVID berupa lockdown atau partial lockdown berdampak pada hampir 2,7 miliar pekerja, mewakili sekitar 81% tenaga kerja dunia. Sementara pemerintah telah memobilisasi kekuatan untuk mengembangkan langkah-langkah luar biasa dalam mengatasi dampak ekonomi dari krisis COVID-19. Kadin Indonesia mendorong pengusaha dan industri untuk berfokus pada ketahanan dan upaya mitigasi risiko dari situasi ini dengan tetap mengutamakan tanggung jawab sosial bagi pekerja. Kami meyakini pengusaha sebagai pejuang ekonomi memiliki peran penting untuk dimainkan, tidak hanya untuk menyediakan barang dan jasa yang diperlukan, tetapi juga memastikan lapangan kerja tetap ada sehingga mendorong pemulihan ekonomi yang kuat. Akhir kata, saya mengucapkan selamat berdiskusi. Semoga dapat menghasilkan inisiatif-inisiatif yang bermanfaat untuk kita semua. Terima kasih dan sekali lagi salam sehat untuk semua. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, following our next agenda, now please welcome His Excellency Mr. Yasona Lawli, Minister of Law and Human Rights of the Republic of Indonesia.
Thank you, moderator, Indita Nabila. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Salam kebajikan. Yang saya hormati, European Union Ambassador to Indonesia and Brunei, Darussalam, His Excellency Vincent Piquet, Ketua Umum Kamar Dagang dan Industri Indonesia, Bapak Arsyad Rashid, Presiden Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development, Ibu Sinta Kamdani, Deputy Resident Representative UNDP Indonesia, Mrs. Sophie Kemkatse, para panelis, perwakilan Kadin, IBCSD members, perwakilan Eurochamp members, para CEO dan pimpinan perusahaan, para hadirin sekalian serta tamu undangan yang saya cintai. Marilah kita panjatkan puji syukur kehadirat Tuhan Yang Maha Kuasa yang senantiasa menganugerahkan nikmat dan karunia-Nya sehingga pada hari ini kita masih mendapatkan kesempatan untuk menghadiri dan mengikuti kegiatan CEO Forum on Responsible Business in the time of COVID-19 pandemic and beyond yang diselenggarakan oleh Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development walaupun masih dalam kondisi pandemi COVID-19. Saya ingatkan kepada kita semua untuk selalu menjaga protokol kesehatan. Semoga kita senantiasa dilimpahkan kesehatan yang baik agar kita semua dapat terus maju dan meninggalkan pandemi ini di masa mendatang. Seperti yang diingatkan oleh Bapak Presiden, kendati pun sekarang tren jumlah COVID di Indonesia semakin menurun secara baik, namun kita tetap harus waspada agar kita dapat melewati masa sulit-sulit ini dan agar tidak terjadi lagi peningkatan yang tiba-tiba seperti beberapa waktu yang lalu. Para hadirin yang berbahagia, pada tahun 2011, Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa mengadopsi prinsip-prinsip panduan PBB untuk bisnis dan HAM atau United Nations on Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, UNGPs, sebagai kerangka kerja normatif untuk tata laku perilaku perusahaan instrumen yang didasarkan pada pelembagaan hubungan antar negara adalah menjadi it is the duty of the nation to protect human rights. However, business communities also should responsible for protecting human rights in their business environment. I think this is the purpose of this meeting, that business communities can have a share in promoting human rights principle in their economic, in their business communities. Aktor politik negara dan non-negara juga harus melakukan hal yang sama. Kerangka kerja bisnis dan HAM di atas meletakkan dasar untuk menghasilkan sarana yang diperlukan untuk memajukan agenda bisnis dan HAM. Kerangka ini menjabarkan peran dan tanggung jawab yang dibedakan, namun saling melengkapi untuk negara dan perusahaan. Sifatnya menjadi komplementer, termasuk mencakup usaha-usaha pemulihan ketika terjadinya kesalahan. Sifatnya sistemik, artinya bagian komponen dimaksudkan untuk mendukung, memperkuat satu sama lain, menciptakan proses dinamis dari kemajuan kumulatif yang tidak menyita langkah-langkah tambahan untuk jangka panjang. Kerangka kerja ini dikonstruksikan melalui 3 prinsip dasar kewajiban negara untuk melindungi HAM, tanggung jawab perusahaan untuk menghormati HAM, dan akses pemulihan pelanggaran HAM baik melalui mekanisme yudisial maupun mekanisme non-yudisial. Kerangka kerja di ataslah yang membentuk terciptanya bisnis yang bertanggung jawab sesuai dengan tema kegiatan ini atau disebut dengan responsible business. Di masa pandemi seperti ini, bisnis yang bertanggung jawab bukan hanya satu bisnis yang dapat dipertanggungjawabkan secara publik dan secara keuangan, melainkan juga merupakan bisnis yang dapat merespons pada keadaan-keadaan luar biasa, darurat, mendesak, di luar kenormalan seperti yang kita alami hampir 2 tahun belakangan ini. I would like to stress that the government of Indonesia has done what is his duties during this pandemic. But we would like to ask to back, if necessarily, all the communities, all the business communities to have their share in this pandemic, to help people. Indonesia is struggling with these economic problems. So I think a business community can have a share together with the government and all the people to handle this world's pandemic, which is happen all over the world. Para hadirin yang berbahagia, tingginya ketidakpastian saat pandemi COVID-19 berdampak berat pada dunia usaha di tanah air. Hal ini membuat perusahaan harus melakukan perubahan dan terobosan yang inovatif untuk bisa bertahan. Perusahaan pun harus membuat keputusan yang tepat dalam merombak strategi agar roda bisnis bisa berjalan dengan berlandaskan pada situasi ekonomi baru di tahun 2021. Masa pandemi ini juga membawa perubahan sikap perusahaan agar menjadi lebih efisien. Beberapa perusahaan sepakat untuk meningkatkan rasa kehati-hatian dalam berinvestasi. Namun demikian, investasi teknologi merupakan yang dipandang penting. Investasi teknologi menjadi proses bisnis yang lebih cepat, efisien, efektif.
Dari sisi
kecepatan organisasi dalam merombak proses bisnisnya juga menentukan kemampuan bertahan menghadapi ketidakpastian di masa pandemi maupun setelahnya. Beberapa perusahaan juga harus berinvestasi dalam kompetensi karyawannya, baik dari kompetensi teknis maupun non-teknis, terutama dalam pemecahan masalah pengambilan keputusan. Oleh karena itu, pandemi COVID-19 telah mendorong dilakukannya transformasi ekonomi, di mana peran teknologi digital menjadi sangat penting sebagai upaya mempercepat perizinan, penyederhanaan birokrasi serta reformasi regulasi. As you all know that Indonesia, the government of Indonesia, along with the parliament, has just passed the law, job creation law, responding to the needs of the business community to make all the permit and easier. We hope that all of you in here can make your share to invest in our country. That we realize that during this pandemic, all the business along with investment also suffer from this condition. However, as I said, that we have to share the burden to help the people and to apply human right principle in their approach and doing their business. Transformasi digital dibutuhkan untuk keberlanjutan bisnis. Pandemi COVID-19 telah mendorong transformasi digital yang lebih cepat dan mendorong perusahaan untuk mengubah dan mencari cara baru dalam menjalankan bisnis dan berinteraksi dengan konsumennya. Pimpinan perusahaan harus segera memulai dan memastikan kesuksesan dari transformasi digital tersebut. Infrastruktur back-end dan strategi pengelolanya merupakan fondasi penting dalam kesuksesan digital. Para hadirin yang saya banggakan, dunia bisnis juga memerankan kontribusi penting untuk pemulihan ekonomi nasional dalam masa pandemi COVID-19 ini. Tidak sedikit perusahaan yang melakukan tanggung jawab sosialnya untuk saling bahu-membahu menanggulangi pandemi dengan berbagai cara. Untuk itu saya mengucapkan terima kasih. Secara simultan, perusahaan memiliki 3 tanggung jawab yang bagi pemangku kepentingannya. Pertama, tanggung jawab ekonomi. Berkaitan dengan hal tersebut, para pengelola perusahaan korporasi memiliki tanggung jawab ekonomi diantaranya kepada para pemegang saham dalam bentuk pengelolaan kepada perusahaan yang menghasilkan laba. Kedua, adalah tanggung jawab hukum. Menjalankan operasinya perusahaan korporasi harus mematuhi berbagai peraturan perundang-undangan yang berlaku sebagai bentuk tanggung jawab perusahaan. Tujuan penegakan hukum adalah agar suatu perusahaan tidak dirugikan oleh tindakan perusahaan pesaing lainnya. Ketiga, adalah tanggung jawab sosial, social responsibility. Tanggung jawab sosial adalah suatu komitmen perusahaan untuk mengembangkan komunitas, meningkatkan kesejahteraan komunitas melalui kebebasan perusahaan dalam mengambil tindakan melalui praktek-praktek bisnisnya. Bisa dapat memberikan kontribusi bagi masyarakat di masa pandemi dengan berbagai cara. Dari catatan kami, banyak kontribusi yang dilakukan dunia bisnis di tengah pandemi ini. Ada perusahaan yang membangkitkan aktivitas pengusaha kecil menengah dengan menggerakkan pelaku usaha mikro, kecil, dan menengah di tengah masa pandemi COVID-19. Juga terdapat perusahaan yang mengadakan berbagai program pelatihan manajemen, keterampilan, dan promosi, serta aktif mensosialisasikan agar UMKM lebih mampu menyesuaikan diri dan responsif dalam melihat peluang bisnis selama pandemi COVID-19. Misalnya, perusahaan dapat menjadikan mitra binaannya untuk memproduksi masker kain non-medis. Contoh lain, misalnya terdapat perusahaan telekomunikasi yang membagikan kartu perdana kuota untuk membantu para siswa dalam melaksanakan pembelajaran jarak jauh selama masa pandemi COVID-19. Dalam perusahaan di bidang kesehatan juga terdapat terobosan klinik apung untuk mendukung pemerintah dalam meningkatkan pelayanan kesehatan bagi masyarakat di kawasan pelosok. Para hadirin yang saya banggakan, bisnis yang bertanggung jawab atau responsible business merupakan tanggung jawab di tengah masa sulit yang sedang kita hadapi ini. Pemerintah juga mengapresiasi dunia bisnis yang senantiasa bermitra dengan pemerintah dan membantu pemerintah dalam melaksanakan program pemulihan ekonomi nasional. Hanya dengan bisnis yang bertanggung jawab, suatu perusahaan dapat bertahan di masa sulit sekalipun, dan saling bergotong royong membantu masyarakat yang membutuhkan. Dalam kesempatan yang baik ini, tidak lupa saya ingin menyampaikan apresiasi kepada Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development yang telah mendukung kegiatan ini dan berkomitmen berkolaborasi dengan pemerintah dalam memajukan bisnis dan HAM. I really appreciate the IBCSD that has support this program, this CA forum that I think in the future, I believe that we all will be able to handle the pandemic that has affected us economically, also health and socially, even in some countries politically, like our neighbor. Oleh karena itu, kepada semua CEO saya berpesan agar mengedepankan prinsip-prinsip HAM dalam membuat kebijakan perusahaan dan melaksanakan operasional bisnis perusahaan. Akhir kata, kiranya Tuhan yang Maha Kuasa senantiasa memberi kekuatan lahir dan batin kepada kita semua dan semoga cepat berakhir juga pada masa pandemi COVID-19 yang masih melanda bangsa kita selama ini. Terima kasih atas perhatiannya. Allahumma muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti Om. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Excellency, Mr. Yasona, from the warm greetings, and thank you, Mr. Arshad, for the remarkable speech. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to our next agenda, I would like to invite our distinguished speakers and participants to have a photo session together. You may turn on your camera, get ready to get your screen captured, and please wait on my cue. Our organizing committee will be ready to capture the moment. You may also capture the screen on your own devices. Okay, are we ready? Now, on my cue, I will count down 3 seconds and we will capture the moment together.
Foto apanya yang rame-ramenya itu.
All right, on my cue, in 3, 2, 1. Let us take the photo once again. On my cue, in 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much for your participations. We would like to give our highest gratitude to His Excellency Mr. Yasona Lawli, Minister of Law and Human Rights of the Republic of Indonesia, and Mr. Arshad Rashid, Chairman of Kadin Indonesia, for giving the precious time to all of us in today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, coming to next our agenda, allow me to invite His Excellency Mr. Vincent Piquet, European Union Ambassador to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, to the screen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Your Excellency Yasona Lawli, Minister of Law and Human Rights of the Government of Indonesia, Mr. Arshad Rashid, Chairman of Kadin. I greet my colleague, Ms. Sophie Kemlin-Hatse, the UNDP Deputy Resident Representative, Ms. Shinta Kamdani, the President of IBCSD and the Vice Chair of Kadin. I greet Mr. Livio Sandra Rea, the Business and Human Rights Advisor of UNDP in the Southeast Asia region. I greet all the members of Kadin, of other chambers, of the business community present in this session today, coming from IBCSD, as well as Eurocham, and honorable ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to see so many of us together today in the CEO Forum on responsible business in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. It's a fact that the COVID pandemic has turned everything upside down in almost every country and territory in the world, with very few places left untouched. The pandemic is a global calamity affecting people's health, taking millions of human lives, disturbing social stability and coherence, and uprooting the economy. It's a crisis that countries cannot overcome alone, in isolation, whether they're advanced or emerging economies. In fact, at present day, we are all re-emerging economies, health-wise, economically, and socially. We therefore have to find ways to collaborate and to support one another to combat the virus and the pandemic and to recover from its consequences and build new resilience in our economies and in our societies. It's evident that business has to play a role in this and to make this happen. Kadin and its members here in Indonesia, Eurocham and its members representing the European businesses in Indonesia, and everybody else. The European Union and its member states know that for the recovery of the global economy, we need to work together inside Europe and outside with our partner countries to boost growth and support business. We do that in the spirit of what's called building back better, and a spirit in which the EU and the member states are convinced that as consumers or as shareholders, as investors or as policymakers, we must make respect for human rights a key feature of our support and of our re-emergence. That's a commitment we've made, and it is also made by Indonesia, and we see it demonstrated here today by the participation of so many colleagues representing the EU countries as well as Indonesia. As far as the EU is concerned, specifically in Indonesia, the EU and the EU member states together as Team Europe, as we call it, have made available massive funding to help Indonesia combat the crisis and overcome it. About 200 million euros, much of it going to the health sector, to hospital infrastructure, and about 10 million, that is roughly 170 billion rupiahs, going to civil society organizations looking after the vulnerable people, the disadvantaged people, the marginalized people who suffer most from the crisis. That's one area of work. But the other area of work is the economy and business. Global supply chains continue to bring enormous benefits to the emerging economies as well as to the advanced economies. But in many cases, the benefits are clouded by business-related human rights issues, such as forced labor, land grabbing, environmental damage, corruption, which some say is the price one has to pay for economic growth. Now, that is, of course, not true. During the pandemic, human rights risk within business operations have not decreased. On the contrary, they have even worsened in some sectors, urging us to find solutions to protect the most vulnerable. For several decades, multinational companies have been encouraged to apply responsible business practices in their supply chains on a voluntary basis. However, the available evidence suggests that a voluntary approach wasn't always enough. And for that reason, the EU has taken additional steps in Europe, including mandatory due diligence. A strengthened business and human rights framework has important advantages, such as creating a level playing field for all companies operating on the EU market. There are no free riders in such a comprehensive framework. It brings legal clarity and certainty, which is vital for investors, and it establishes effective enforcement possibilities and a sanctions mechanism. To increase the uptake of the business and human rights agenda, the EU and UNDP are supporting countries in the implementation of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which is, I think, the world's most authoritative normative framework for promoting responsible business practices. Turning to Indonesia, I'm happy to note that Indonesia has taken crucial steps towards promoting the protection of human rights in business operations. The government is developing the national strategy on business and human rights for Indonesia, and it's important that this is done through a consultative process that is led by the Ministry of Law and Human Rights. I'm very pleased to learn that besides relevant ministries, businesses, business associations, and civil society organizations are also involved in the development process, and that the public consultation starting in October will further strengthen the strategy. And I congratulate the Minister and his colleagues for the work undertaken on this. The consultative approach is very important as business leaders play a key role in translating frameworks, legal frameworks, strategies and legislations into effective business practices. There has to be this connection between lawmaking and the business reality. And that will help minimize not only the negative impacts on people and communities, but it will also enable businesses to make sure that respect for human rights favors the financial bottom line. Being with us today, whether we are from Indonesia, from Europe, it proves something. It proves that your commitment to preparing your business for mandatory due diligence but also to building more resilient economies with companies respectful of human rights. And when business leaders commit, real change can start to happen. I'm therefore very happy to see these discussions this morning with you, committed business leaders and others, taking place today. Terima kasih banyak dan semoga sukses.
Thank you, His Excellency Mr. Vincent, for the remarks. Now I would like to invite Ms. Sophie Kemkat, Deputy Resident Representative, UNDP Indonesia, to give her remarks. Ms. Sophie, you are welcome to the screen.
Thank you very much, Ibu Indita. Selamat pagi and very good morning. I am pleased to welcome you at this webinar on responsible business in the time of the COVID pandemic and beyond. Allow me to extend my special greetings to His Excellency, Mr. Yasona Laoli, Minister of Law and Human Rights of Indonesia, to His Excellency, Mr. Vincent Piquet, European Union Ambassador to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, Pak Arsyad Rashid, Chair of Kadin, Ibu Shinda Kamdani, Vice Chair of Kadin and President of IBCSD, Mr. Livio Sarandrea, Business and Human Rights Advisor, UNDP Asia Pacific, distinguished CEOs present here today, ladies and gentlemen. UNDP Indonesia is proud to host today's dialogue in partnership with the European Union and in collaboration with the Indonesia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Kadin, and the Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development. This conversation could not be more timely. As it was said already, the COVID pandemic is not only a health-related emergency, but it has created devastating socioeconomic impacts worldwide, which caused millions of people to lose their jobs and livelihoods. Last year, Indonesia recorded its highest unemployment rate at the level of 7%, with some 2.67 million people losing their jobs during the pandemic. The crisis has also exacerbated setbacks to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. At least 119 million people have been pushed into poverty globally, according to our own UN report. We have seen a reversal in Indonesia's declining poverty rate last year, with women, elderly, and vulnerable communities in rural areas being mostly affected. How can we recover from the pandemic and progress towards the SDGs? This is the most pertinent question these days. To answer this question, let's focus on the opportunities in front of us. As we take steps to rebuild our economy, we are now presented with a unique possibility to transition to a green model that allows us to reduce material consumption, waste, and emission while sustaining growth and creating more jobs. And this is where the private sector can come in with their innovative and fresh ideas. Indeed, the private sector has driven Indonesia's growth before the pandemic and holds the key to addressing issues that have been magnified during the pandemic: social inequality and economic exclusion. Indonesia's COVID vaccination rate has been growing steadily. This success, among others, can also be attributed to the private sector, which has conducted massive free vaccination drives as part of their CSR programs. But we all know that responsible business means much more than providing vaccines and assisting in a crisis. Responsible business is an ongoing practice of measuring and avoiding negative impacts on the human rights on individual, community, and workers level. Today, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights is at the spear point of a responsible business agenda that is driving a new approach to trade, investment, and regulatory policy. As the world's authoritative normative framework guiding responsible business practices, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights is an indispensable resource to the government and businesses to protect and demonstrate respect for human rights in the context of business operations. Further, it is a central point to the joint effort to attract foreign direct investment, build new partnerships, and spur job creation. Today's speakers will provide both an international and Indonesian perspective on why respecting human rights is imperative for business. We are eager to learn from their experiences in integrating human rights within their operations. Addressing human rights in their operations can help companies identify barriers to discrimination against women who make up the bulk of Indonesia's thriving micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. A UNDP survey on the impact of the pandemic on MSMEs revealed that 37% of women-owned MSMEs have faced a decline in revenue between 40 to 60%. With incentives from the private sector, we can and must support women entrepreneurs, especially those that have multiple roles, both in their professional commitments and family responsibilities. We hope that the business leaders today will take these key messages back to their boards and translate them into real actions. Decisions you make will determine sustainability of your businesses onwards. As the Honorable Minister has said, responsible business means upholding of human rights principles and responsibilities at all times, including, and perhaps most importantly, during the difficult times. Commitment to respecting human rights must be translated into operational processes and into real actions, including undertaking human rights due diligence. Later this month, UNDP and IBCSD will conduct training on human rights due diligence. Under the guiding principles, human rights due diligence will help businesses to identify and take actions on potential human rights risks. This commitment is in line with UNDP's latest country program document, which promotes a stronger and closer engagement with the private sector. The pandemic has taught us that we must go beyond standard development models in problem solving. We know the private sector is no stranger to disruptive models of problem solving, and I hope that with our combined experience, we can extend on all these ideas and hope them back just solutions to complex challenges. UNDP Indonesia, in partnership with the EU and in collaboration with the Ministry of Law and Human Rights and various stakeholders, for which I want to express my deepest gratitude, works with the government of Indonesia in the development of the national strategy on business and human rights to help both government and businesses place human rights at the core of business operations. We are encouraged by the latest developments under the leadership of the Ministry of Law and Human Rights. A draft of the National Strategy on Business and Human Rights is being assessed by the task force comprised of 20 ministries, CSOs, and business associations, including CADIN. As we work towards a common goal for achieving responsible business practices, Indonesia's profile as a destination for investment and trade will increase in tandem, creating jobs and making for an even more resilient nation in times of crisis. I once again thank our partners, Ministry of Law and Human Rights, European Union, CADIN, and IBCSD for the collaboration, and you all for your interest and commitment in upholding human rights in corporate sector. Allow me to stop here and wish you productive discussion today. Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you, Ms. Sophie, for the remarks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are now coming to the main agenda of today's event. Allow me to hand over the session to Ms. Desi Anwar, who will lead the session until the end. Ms. Desi Anwar, you are welcome to the screen.
Thank you very much, Indita. Terima kasih banyak, Indita. Selamat pagi, very good morning to you all, and welcome to this extremely important discussion on how to conduct responsible business in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. And thank you also to our previous keynote speakers for very enlightening presentations on how important it is for businesses to engage in best business practices in respecting and protecting human rights. And of course, businesses should not just focus on creating profit or employment, but also must add social benefits, particularly to people in general and also to the planet. Environmentally responsible business practices is a very, very crucial point that we need to focus on these days, not just in times of normal situations, but particularly so in the times of crisis. And we have now come to the discussion session of the seminar, and we have 5 very distinguished speakers with us. And these are panelists who are experts in their fields. They are representatives of companies. And let me just introduce them one by one. Sekali lagi, terima kasih telah bergabung dalam forum ini. Ini merupakan awal dari kegiatan pelatihan 4 hari ya, mengenai human rights due diligence, khusus bagi pelaku bisnis di Indonesia. Nah, tujuannya adalah untuk tentu saja membangun pemahaman ya tentang bisnis dan sumber daya manusia, dan juga untuk memastikan bahwa semua bisnis yang beroperasi di Indonesia mementingkan ya human rights atau hak asasi manusia sebagai landasannya. First speaker we have Livio Sandrarea, Business and Human Rights Advisor from UNDP. Thank you, Livio, for joining us today. And our second speaker, VP from Corporate Affairs, Sintesa Group, an executive committee member of Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development, IBCSD, Pak Yono Reksoprojo. Pagi Pak Yono. Dan speaker berikutnya dari PT Pan Brothers. This is one of the bigger companies here in Indonesia. Vice President of PT Pan Brothers, Ibu Anne Patricia Sutanto. Bu Anne, very good morning. And from PT Merck.
Good morning, Bu Desi.
Welcome to the panel. We have the President Director of PT Merck, also another big company, multinational company, Bu Evi Yulin. Bu Evi, selamat pagi, Bu.
Pagi, Bu Desi.
Yeah, last but not least, dari Asia Pulp and Paper, APP Sinarmas, kita ada Bu Sera Nuviani sebagai Sustainability Compliance Head. Bu Sera, selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi, Bu Desi.
Yeah, so we will start the discussion with just a little bit of thoughts from each of our speakers on the topic of the day. Let's start with you, Livio. You're from the UNDP, and we know that UNDP are working together with Indonesia and the European Union to make sure that we conduct the necessary due diligence. And we know that the United Nations have guiding principles on business and human rights, and this is the highest standards that all businesses in the world should comply with. Livio, tell us, how is the implementation of the UNGPs so far, particularly at this region, and not just during the COVID-19 pandemic, but as a whole, since the guiding practices, the guiding principles were drafted out by the UN. Livio.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure to answer to this question. Really a pleasure to be here to discuss such an important issue, especially, I should say, after what I found very inspiring introductions of those that kicked off the event today. And I'm saying that sincerely. Not all events have necessarily opening remarks that are as inspiring as those that I've heard today. So it's really a pleasure to come in after the people that spoke before me and offer 4 reflections that I think will provide at least an initial answer to your $1 million question and offer these reflections to the panelists and hopefully to the speakers. And my first reflection is actually on the growth of the responsible business discourse, which goes right to the heart of the question that you posed. And I'm talking about Asia, but in principle about the global responsible discourse, and certainly in Indonesia. So this discourse has really grown very fast, I would say, in the 4 or 5 years. In a way, you see the very setup and the thematic focus of this event today, even if you like the composition of this panel in itself, is to me an evidence of how far we have come. When I started working on business and human rights in Asia around 6 years ago, it really would have been unthinkable to get 4 CEOs or senior managers of the level of my co-panelists today of important Indonesian company to sit in a panel and discuss about human rights due diligence. I'm going to be very honest. I see today 80 CEOs or other senior managers listening today interested in discussing approaches that go beyond corporate social responsibility. I see that the slide is already on. I can ask the organizers to perhaps bring that slide a little later, and on one more of the point that I'll make.
Ya, mungkin slide-nya nanti dulu katanya.
Right. So it's really exciting to see so many CEOs and senior managers talking about human rights due diligence, talking about a human rights approach to business operation as illustrated by the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And it is of this, what I like to call human rights lens applied to business operation during and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, which is the subject of, more specific subject of our discussion today, that I would really like to talk about, because this human rights lens, it's a critical lens to be used these days in the process of building back better, building back forward, as it was said before, but much beyond this time of crisis. And indeed, in the last 2 years, UNDP, the EU, other actors have been holding many events on this subject of a human rights approach to business operations. Almost on a monthly basis, we have in this region and around the world, it would be probably on a weekly basis an event on human rights-based approach to business operations. And importantly, the knowledge of these business actors is increasing rapidly. Still a long way to go, but it's increasing quite rapidly. And in fact, companies are not anymore just subject to these norms on human rights, but are actually helping in shaping them. My second point is to reinforce a message that was shared very well by the EU representative, and is that while it is clear that companies are understanding in growing numbers the importance of human rights due diligence and the concept itself of business compliance with human rights standard is also evolving rapidly, right? So those that have become familiar with the requirements set by the UN Guiding Principles are now confronted with an interpretation of these standards that is becoming increasingly more mandatory in nature. And I'm again referring to the recent developments at the EU level. Already many EU member states under which from 2023 European companies will have to ensure their operation throughout their supply chain do not abuse human rights. So we all understand that given the global nature of the value chains, these rules will end up impacting quite directly and very soon on companies beyond Europe. So certainly a great part of Indonesian companies, those that supply products to the EU multinational or that sell in the EU indeed, will be de facto binded by those same rules, mandatory rules as the EU companies. So what we are signaling here is not just a risk, which is obvious, the one of progressively losing access to the EU market, which I believe is the second trade partner of ASEAN, but also an opportunity. And I want to stress that there's a clear opportunity, in my view, to increase competitiveness in the EU markets for those actors that are faster than others in flagging, proving, if possible, compliance with human rights standards. And so those fastest, they will be faster in showing to the EU companies that they can be liability risk-free suppliers, if I can use that expression, for the EU companies, will have a chance not only to maintain, but in my view, to increase the volume of their business interaction with the EU companies. And with this, I come to my third point in relation to policies required at national level that on one side, flag to trading partners. I'm referring obviously to the strategy on business and human rights brought in by many others before me. So those strategies flag to trading partners the supply chains, in this case in Indonesia, will be as clean and green as possible. And on the other, very importantly, and this is a message I want to pass to companies especially, those policies level playing field for the forward-looking companies like those present today that are interested in compliance with standards, that are interested in protecting their business while protecting people and the planet, while not giving undue advantages, if I may say so, to those companies that in the short term, because the gap is filling soon, in the short term, could still take advantage of taking shortcuts through human rights abuses, if I may say that. So again, we've heard a lot of reference to the national strategies on business and human rights. I think that the adoption of such a plan, given the current circumstances, is quite urgent and in the interest of Indonesian companies. We know, and you made reference to the fact that I have a regional role. Some other countries in the region have already gone ahead and made their position very clear to actors like the EU, for example, in terms of how clean and green their supply chains are likely to be. Thailand and Japan have adopted their national action plan. In Indonesia, such plan has been in the work for 4 years almost. And it would really be a pity to be left behind now that the clear positioning vis-a-vis responsible supply chains, I believe, is more critical than ever. Let me come, and probably my time is coming to an end, to the more specific focus of our event today, if I may, the reflection on the COVID-19. So what is expected from responsible business during time of COVID-19 pandemic and beyond? Now, human rights due diligence requirements do evolve, mutate, and depending on the scenarios in which companies operate. So times of crisis call for what we call heightened due diligence or enhanced due diligence. And the UN Guiding Principles speak, for example, of the need of heightened due diligence in conflict-affected areas, right? One could think, for example, now about scenarios in Myanmar or in Afghanistan. But I would argue that heightened human rights due diligence is also important to be applied in other times of crisis, such as the health emergencies. Okay. And it's been said by many, the pandemic has hit businesses very hard. Companies are facing bankruptcy, millions of jobs were lost. And against this background, it's important, as others have done, to acknowledge the many businesses positively impacted and contributed to the enjoyment of rights during the pandemic. The most obvious example of it, there couldn't be a better one, is the companies that came up with a vaccine and are distributing it. What better impact on the rights to health, for example, could there be in these days, right? So companies deserve a lot of praise for that.
Okay, Livio, if I can just jump in a minute, because we have a your time is over, but I would like to just reiterate my main question in the beginning. I mean, you've given us a very good background and the importance for companies to actually implement these guiding principles and also the necessary benefits. But just for Indonesia in itself, in terms of how you see, I mean, you said this is mandatory and companies should comply, but how has Indonesia as a whole been implementing this UNGP? And also, you know, what are the lessons learned and what can be done to improve their compliance when it comes to UNGPs on businesses and human rights? Just very quickly in this issue.
Yeah, just
how do we score, particularly compared to our neighbors?
Again, I mean, the scoring compared to neighbors, it's difficult to make. Perhaps one could go to certain indexes that exist that I'm now not going to necessarily. What I can say, I'm referring to the growth of the discourse, because the first step is the awareness, the being aware of the consequences of your impact. And I think on that, we have progressed a lot. The next step is, once companies are aware, they want to know, how do we go about it? How do we conduct human rights due diligence? I think we are in this second phase. Now companies want to be helped in conducting human rights due diligence. And this is why our project is investing now on training on human rights due diligence, right? So there are many companies that come and say, we got it. We need to do it. We want to do it. There's also a business case for it. How do we do it? And here, so what the step we are in now in Indonesia is to capacitate companies. And I'm not talking about the biggest, largest one. They may already have some of that capacity, but the smaller ones, the MSMEs, they want to know how to go about it. So we are in that step of the process in Indonesia. We need to help companies in doing what, to a large extent, they have understood they need.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Livio. Okay, well, let's hope we can pick on that later. We will have a question and answer session after discussion with the panelists. So if any of you would like to ask questions, please do so via chat. But I would now like to go to our next speaker, and Pak Yono Reksoprojo, VP Corporate Affairs of Sintesa Group. Also, Pak Yono is an executive committee member of Indonesia Business Council for Sustainable Development. Pak Yono, ini kalau kita melihat kan di Indonesia sebenarnya selain UNGP, United Nations Guiding Principles on Businesses and Human Rights, kita juga punya yang namanya SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, dan IBCSD tentu sangat-sangat ini yang mementingkan ya mengenai SDGs ini. Ini kira-kira mungkin dari pandangan Anda sebagai IBCSD, Pak Yono, bagaimana bisnis di Indonesia menghormati hak asasi manusia selama ini? Bukan saja masa pandemi, tapi sebelum-sebelumnya. Silakan Pak Yono.
Terima kasih Mbak Desi. Kalau boleh saya bagi dua ini jawabannya. Pertama, tentunya saya akan jelaskan dulu sejarah awal isu mengenai human rights in business ini dibawa ke Indonesia. Saya lihat di antara partisipan yang ada di sini ada Pak James Kalman, karena beliau salah satu orang yang waktu itu saya kira beberapa tahun yang lalu, mungkin 4-5 tahun yang lalu melakukan approach ke Kadin, dan lewat perusahaan kami Sintesa Group bersama dengan Pak Masuki Darusman dan Profesor Makarim Wibisono pada saat itu try to introduce what is then known as human rights in business. Nah, ada beberapa hal yang kami pakai sebagai pegangan, dan ini saya kira nanti yang akan dijadikan pegangan juga oleh organisasi-organisasi seperti IBCSD, yaitu bahwa human rights is supposed to be state duty and everybody knows that. Tapi at the same time corporate need to respect. Nah, ini ada beberapa hal yang saya kira ada kaitannya, sehingga berbicara mengenai human rights adalah sesuatu hal yang akan mencakup semua pihak, nggak bisa sendiri. Nggak bisa hanya satu dari sisi pemerintah akan selalu kejar-kejaran gitu. Siapa yang tadi Pak Livio menjelaskan sedikit banyak mengenai apakah ada pelanggaran human rights, ini akan terus dikejar oleh pemerintah kalau industri tidak ikut berpartisipasi. Nah, sehingga pemahaman mengenai human rights dalam bisnis ini menjadi satu hal yang sangat-sangat penting. Nah, ini sebabnya Mbak Desi, kalau boleh saya share slide saya hanya ingin menceritakan sedikit apa yang kami lakukan di perusahaan kami yang kemudian menjadi hal Mbak, kalau boleh saya share pakai slide saya nih yang apa namanya? Bukan yang ini dulu. Oke, terima kasih. Saya share sedikit ya. Ini yang kami jadikan sebagai salah satu contoh kelihatannya dari apa yang saya kira ingin kami coba jabarkan dalam bentuk hal yang sifatnya mikro, khususnya nanti akan saya jelaskan mengenai isu COVID. Nah, kebetulan perusahaan kami adalah satu perusahaan yang berumur sudah lebih dari 100 tahun, dan dalam perjalanannya, kemudian Ibu Sinta Wijaya Kamdani yang menjadi CEO dan pemilik dari perusahaan, mencoba untuk menerjemahkan satu pendekatan yang sedikit berbeda dengan masa sebelumnya. Pendekatan seperti apa? Pendekatan yang lebih menjelaskan di mana posisi kita dalam melihat peran terhadap people, planet, dan profit. Itu sebabnya kemudian kami mencoba untuk membuat satu agenda roadmap yang kita sebut dalam perusahaan namanya Synthesis for Earth. Lalu apa itu sebetulnya? Nah, ini adalah satu hal yang sebetulnya merefleksikan. Jadi berangkatnya adalah sebagai refleksi dari 10 kunci perilaku yang kemudian kami terjemahkan dalam 4 kultur kami. Jadi ada 4E di situ ya, ada entrepreneur, empathy, excellence, empowerment, di mana di dalam situ dari 4 hal yang kami sarikan tadi ada beberapa hal yang terkait dengan peduli, menghargai, tanggung jawab, kemudian mengukur resiko, melibatkan dan menyelaraskan, dan hal-hal seperti itu yang kemudian pada saat COVID datang, nah, kami ditantang ini untuk bisa menerjemahkannya secara praktis, jadi practical implementation dari apa yang kami dengung-dengungkan selama ini. Tentunya sebelum ada COVID, kami justru memiliki kesulitan bagaimana caranya untuk menjelaskan empati misalnya. Apa sih empati gitu? Ini kan setiap orang punya penilaiannya sendiri-sendiri. Nggak ada yang sifatnya kuantitatif di situ, penilaiannya selalu sifatnya kualitatif. Tapi pada saat COVID datang, maka kami mencoba menerjemahkan ada 3 hal. Ya, tadi ada hal-hal yang ada kaitannya bagaimana caranya coping dengan situasi seperti ini. Nah, tentunya kami mesti punya pendirian dulu satu. Siapa yang mau didahulukan? Bisnisnya atau orang-orangnya? Nah, kadang-kadang ada pemikiran ini yang kemudian menjadi banyak perdebatan gitu, dipolitisir lah di masyarakat dan pemerintah. Kami berpendirian bahwa ada beberapa hal yang bisa kami selaraskan. Nah, untuk bisa melakukan hal seperti itu, maka perusahaan harus membuat yang namanya 3 hal. Yang paling penting, 1 pencegahan, how to avoid. Dan pada saat pencegahan tentunya perusahaan harus mengeluarkan dulu gitu ya. Dan ini saya kira hampir semua perusahaan akan melakukan hal yang sama dan telah melakukan hal yang sama. Tes antigen untuk karyawannya. Kemudian tes PCR untuk mencegah terjadi penularan. Nah, inilah salah satu hal yang kami terjemahkan sebagai inilah satu sumbangan terhadap penghargaan kepada hak asasi pada karyawan kami setidaknya gitu ya, dan masyarakat secara luas untuk mencegah jangan sampai COVID ini kemudian menular menjadi lebih banyak. Kemudian apa yang harus kami pikirkan setelah pencegahan itu dilakukan? Tentunya kalau pencegahan gagal, kita harus bisa melakukan yang namanya respons, tanggap. Respons seperti apa? Respons antara lain, ya bagaimana kalau misalnya ada yang sakit? Apa yang harus dilakukan? Siapa yang akan membiayai dan seterusnya? Itu kami cari berbagai hal. Tentunya perusahaan di mana-mana pegangannya satu, bottom line. It's all about how to make profit. Nah, ini yang harus bisa dibalance. Jadi dalam rangka melakukan kegiatan-kegiatan ini, saya kira ini yang sangat penting. Nah, ini sebabnya kemudian di yang ketiga ini kami mencoba untuk melakukan bagaimana cara melakukan rehabilitation atau pemulihan terhadap hal-hal yang kemudian terdampak. Kami terus terang satu perusahaan konglomerasi kecil lah gitu kalau boleh dibilang ya. Ada beberapa bisnis lain yang juga terdampak sangat severe, yaitu di bisnis pariwisata. Kami ada mengelola hotel. Nah, di sini kami melihat bagaimana kemudian empati itu bukan saja dari perusahaan untuk melakukan ketiga hal tadi yang seperti saya sebutkan, tapi juga peran daripada karyawannya. Pada saat mereka tahu ada kawan-kawannya dari sektor bisnis yang lain, karena ini ada anak-anak perusahaan, 17 perusahaan kami, yang tidak ada kaitan satu dengan yang lain, karena kami ada 4 bisnis pillar yang sangat-sangat berbeda, untuk bisa berpartisipasi, khususnya untuk hal yang terkait dengan bisnis yang terdampak, yaitu bisnis di pariwisata. Kami ada beberapa hotel yang kami kelola. Nah, bagaimana karyawan ini kemudian terpanggil untuk bisa saling membantu. Jadi human rights diterjemahkan dalam hal yang lebih intens ke isu empatinya. Ya, pada saat itu yang tadi saya bilang, corporate to respect. Now we try to go beyond, not only corporate to respect, but also employee to participate di situ. Nah, karena dengan hal seperti ini, saya kira ini akan lebih banyak bisa membantu untuk bisa penyampaian-penyampaian mengenai human rights di lingkungan bisnis dari sisi yang lain mungkin. Bukan abuse, tapi kepada hal yang lebih sifatnya positif. Saya kira itu Mbak Desi.
Ya.
Ini ya.
Pak Yono, ini sangat-sangat menarik ya. Saya lihat juga masa pandemi ini justru merupakan kesempatan baik itu, if you're a computer, it's a good time to reboot or reset, the way we do things, particularly the way we do businesses. I think you raised some very important points. But kalau kita lihat, ini kan ada asosiasi ABCSD dengan banyak anggotanya. Dari para anggota itu sendiri, bagaimana animonya khususnya untuk menggunakan masa pandemi ini untuk mengubah cara mereka melakukan bisnis, mengubah cara mereka memandang bisnis, lebih mementingkan aspek human rights, responsibility-nya, dan juga khususnya terhadap planet kita, SDGs, kepedulian kepada planet kita. Ini bagaimana secara keseluruhan? Ada peningkatan kah?
Ya, kalau dibilang ada peningkatan tentunya karena saya mungkin hadir pada saat pertama kali dibawanya isu ini ke Kadin lah setidaknya gitu ya, kalau tidak ke Indonesia, maka tentunya saya melihat ada peningkatan dari awal gitu karena udah beberapa tahun Mbak Desi. Nah, di slide ini kita coba untuk bisa memperlihatkan ada beberapa hal yang terkait, ada 3 poin dari beberapa poin, tentunya ada 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 poin yang kita bawa di Sintesa Group. Nanti saya kaitkan dari mana aja poin ini kita dapat gitu. Dan tapi ada poin 3 tentang kesehatan dan juga gender equality yang kami dorong di situ. Dan ini adalah beberapa hal yang dikaitkan langsung dengan kegiatan IBCSD itu sendiri. Dan kemudian ada sister organization namanya IBCW. Nanti mungkin ada Mbak Ana di sini bisa jelaskan lebih banyak gitu ya, yang terkait dengan gender equality. Nah, kalau kita lihat bagaimana gitu ya di organisasi ini melakukan respons, ada beberapa hal saya kira yang penting untuk dilihat, bahwa business benefit of addressing human right menjadi satu konteks yang paling penting karena itu akan langsung menuju kepada reducing cost of capital daripada bisnis itu sendiri. Tadi Pak Livio bilang bahwa ada beberapa hal yang dikaitkan dengan sertifikasi misalnya, bahwa compliance terhadap pelaksanaan human rights yang baik dalam satu perusahaan akan menolong supply chain untuk membuka global market gitu sebagai salah satu contoh yang baik. Dan di sini saya kira peran daripada organisasi seperti IBCSD dalam khususnya mengajak anggotanya dulu, yang paling penting anggotanya dulu. Kalau anggotanya tidak bisa memberikan good example ya repot, orang yang ada di luar juga nggak akan percaya nih ngomong doang ini gitu ya. Nah, hal-hal seperti ini saya kira akan menjadi satu hal yang menarik untuk bisa dijadikan satu acuan. Di Kadin sendiri hal ini juga sudah menjadi satu hal yang dibicarakan, walaupun mungkin lagi karena perusahaan di mana-mana seluruh dunia, we are talking about bottom line. It's all about how to make profits. But at the same time, it's also how to open opportunity. Itu juga hal yang paling penting, yang tidak bisa ditinggalkan begitu saja. Karena kalau kita hanya berpikir untuk making profit, malah we lose profit. Nah, ini yang harus dibicarakan karena ke depan masyarakat dunia akan lebih sadar atas hal-hal yang dipentingkan untuk menghargai satu dengan yang lain, yang akan menyebabkan kemudian muncul yang namanya trade barrier. Nah, trade barrier ini akan menjadi hal-hal yang penting untuk bisa disiasati, dan salah satu yang akan menjadi trade barrier di masa depan adalah pelaksanaan dalam korporasi ya tentang hak asasi manusia untuk para karyawan, ya setidaknya itu. Tapi kalau kita lihat lagi yang dilakukan oleh IBCSD juga melakukan pendampingan Mbak Desi. Jadi artinya bagaimana melakukan konsultasi terhadap resolusi konflik misalnya yang terjadi di masyarakat terhadap operasi-operasi yang terjadi bukan hanya anggota kami tapi juga yang ada di tempat yang lain. Baik. Ini terus terang akan menyangkut langsung kepada penghargaan terhadap hak asasi manusia. Terima kasih. Baik,
terima kasih Pak Yono. Mungkin nanti kalau ada waktu kita bisa teruskan bagian mengenai ini. Tapi saya sekarang mempersilahkan pembicara kita berikutnya, Bu Ana Patricia Sutanto dari PT Pan Brothers. Ini sebuah perusahaan tekstil terbesar ya, Vice CEO. Bagaimana Bu Ana setelah kita mendengarkan ini, kan merupakan sesuatu yang keharusan ya sekarang, mau tidak mau perusahaan diminta, dan ini merupakan komitmen, dan selain komitmen SDGs dan lain sebagainya, bagaimana Bu Ana sendiri memandang komitmen untuk bertanggung jawab mengimplementasikan due diligence khusus mengenai human rights terhadap bisnis Anda? Silakan.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much, Ibu Desi, for the detailed questions. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hold on, yeah, Bu Desi. Yeah. 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 So I do apologize because at this moment I actually also handling my other things. Yeah. So
no worries.
For us in Penn Brothers, to be exact, the human rights due diligence comes from our humanity. And after the COVID-19 situations, actually humanity is part of our essence. Yeah, I actually have slides for Penn Brothers where the kickoff of our SGDs happened last week. Hold on, yeah. Do apologize. This, yeah. Yeah. Do.
Okay. Are you controlling the slides
yes.
yourself? Okay.
Yes. No. I think the panitia, the panitia is the one to control. So, yeah. So in that regards, next slide, please. There's only one slide that I want to show actually to everyone. Basically, Penn Brothers is an established garment manufacturer. We have about 30 to 33,000 workers, and this is the slide that we have. But actually, since 5 years ago, we focus on three things, which is the people, planet, as well as profit. But last year, we actually put 5 SDGs on the people. And one of the SDGs that we look at actually the no poverty as well as educations, because we believe that education is part of our development on how we actually involve on human rights, and therefore we actually would like to focus on it, right? And if you ask me, so what is the due diligence on this? Actually, the due diligence is based not only on the social compliance that we as the global brands endorsers or the global brand suppliers have to have, but also our responsibility on how we actually can empower not just the gender equality, but also empower us not to be on so we actually push our workers not to only see their day-to-day, but also to see their career path, right? So that's the thing, right? And to be fair with you, during the COVID-19, I think what Pak Yono has mentioned, the empathy as well as the steps, is what we need to do. Yeah, it's not easy. I'm not saying this to actually say that all of our path is easy, but everything is based on our humanity to make sure that our workers is safe, the family of the workers are safe and protected, but also to make sure that actually we in the company also can make sure that our workers can see not just their health, but also their economy empowerment. So during the COVID-19, regardless of what people say about Indonesia, actually Indonesia has embraced not just on the company level side, but also on the country side. Yeah, I think the government and the private sectors like us has hand-to-hand not just work on the health protocol, but also the vaccinations, right? And why we are doing that? Because we believe that to protect our human in Indonesia is part of our pathway on economy or no poverty SDGs, for example. And then also why we are doing this because of the humanity of Indonesia. Yeah. And there are a lot of theories that people can say about Indonesia, but one thing that I have to say in the last 2 years, the love for the country, the fundamentals of Indonesia is indeed in place, because not just the government, but the private sectors and the people of Indonesia actually can handle, embrace together how to be able to push these human rights, right? We have a lot of people scorn Indonesia, yeah, but I think the one that really can have that path on Indonesia is actually us, the Indonesians. Apology, Bu Desi and everyone else at this moment, because I'm actually doubling you with my I have an online class in Fakultas Hukum UI, and actually the docent is very stern. I actually want to have absent because I am committed to this. Unfortunately, she is not allowing me to do it. So
no worries.
I have to manage.
No worries,
yeah.
but women are very good at
later on I will. Yes, but
okay. Well,
despite everything, docent in UI is different.
Yeah, but just another 2 minutes, because you still have another couple of minutes. I'm just interested. I know the companies, a lot of companies are badly impacted during the COVID pandemic in the almost last 2 years. I just want to know how badly or how has your company been impacted? And also, this is also an opportunity to actually perhaps just, change the fundamental ways of doing business in this instance. What are you doing in order to better, for example, your commitment, not only towards SDGs, but actually to improve human rights and also to promote human rights to not just the stakeholders of the company, obviously, but to the environment, which I think is very, very important, because we have the challenge of climate change these days. Just very quickly, Bu Anna.
Yeah. So a lot has been done. It's a very challenging year for us in 2020 and 2021. But again, I think the fundamental of PAN Brothers is very clear. We have a culture of IPAN. IPAN consists of integrity, passion, action, as well as nationality. And the basis of our nationality or nationalism actually Pancasila. All of you might know that Indonesia have 5 fundamental values: belief in God and humanity. Humanity is actually number 2. Number 5 is working. Number 4 is working together, and number 5 is fairness. And actually, basically, the Pancasila or the 5 fundamentals is almost the exact things of what we have done, which is people, planet, profit, and the SDGs that we push, right? And basically, what we have asked for all the stakeholders, not just our employee, but everyone else that look at the company as a supply chain base, is actually basically humanity. So perhaps all of you know human rights. But what is the basis of human rights? The basis of human rights is always humanity. And I believe 41 years of PAN Brothers, because we have just celebrated our 41st anniversary, is basically humanity. And I come to believe that because even though, we have been scorned here and there, we exist and we actually accelerate our growth. Our business in clothing, last year clothing is down, but our business is not down, and we don't have any layoff of employment, because we also believe that all the team need to be intact. We do not have any PHK, because we also believe that we need to make sure that our members are having an economy empowerment regardless, we are during COVID. And our brands, our buyers stick through, because they believe of our compatibility as well as our compliance. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Bu Anna, and also good luck with your other thing that you have to focus on.
Do apologize.
No worries. No worries. Yeah. I'd like to now turn to our next speaker, Bu Sera Noviani. Of course, you are as the sustainability compliance head, and compliance is, of course, a key when it comes to implementing and conducting this due diligence. Just a similar question to you, Bu Sera. Kira-kira apa saja komitmennya terhadap hak asasi manusia, tapi juga tanggung jawab perusahaan untuk menjunjung tinggi best practices atau good business practices yang dilakukan oleh Asia Pulp and Paper. Silakan, Bu Sera.
Ya, terima kasih Mbak Desi. Pertama kami perkenalkan dulu bahwa FPP Sinarmas ini adalah trade name untuk perusahaan manufaktur pulp dan kertas. Di sini sustainability dan keberlanjutan ini menjadi inti dari strategi bisnis kami. Jadi kami berusaha untuk menciptakan produk dan layanan secara bertanggung jawab melalui proses yang berkelanjutan serta inovatif, serta di sisi lain berusaha meningkatkan kesejahteraan masyarakat dan juga karyawan kami. Nah, pada tahun 2012 kami mengeluarkan komitmen keberlanjutan yang dikenal dengan Sustainability Roadmap Vision 2020. Kami singkat menjadi SRV 2020. Nah, di dalamnya terdapat 10 area kunci yang menjadi fokus pengelolaan dan monitoring kami. Nah, beberapa topik terkait dengan HAM, yaitu penghormatan HAM dan indigenous people, kemudian kesejahteraan karyawan, pemberdayaan masyarakat, kemudian berkaitan dengan sumber bahan baku, kemudian berbicara tentang topik keanekaragaman hayati dan beberapa topik lain yang berisi seperti emisi, climate change, dan lain-lainnya. Nah, dengan berakhirnya periode 2020 di bulan Juli yang lalu, kami juga mengeluarkan Sustainability Roadmap Vision 2030 yang ini merupakan evolusi dan penguatan dari SRV 2020 sebelumnya. Nah, untuk SRV 2030 ini terdapat 3 pilar utama, yaitu pilar produksi, kemudian pilar hutan, dan juga pilar sumber daya manusia. Nah, aspek penghormatan HAM ini kami rasa melekat kepada semua pilar karena berbagai aspek akan terkait dalam bisnis kami. Nah, selain SRV 2030 yang terakhir baru dikeluarkan, kami juga memiliki kebijakan konservasi hutan atau Forest Conservation Policy. Di dalamnya terdapat 4 komitmen utama, yaitu perlindungan hutan alam, kemudian pengelolaan gambut, dan yang ketiga adalah komitmen sosial serta rantai pasok global. Nah, untuk komitmen sosial ini, beberapa fokus area kami adalah terkait peningkatan kesejahteraan masyarakat, kemudian menghormati hak-hak masyarakat lokal dan adat, kemudian implementasi Free Prior Informed Consent atau FPIC, dan juga penanganan keluhan melalui mekanisme grievance, serta adanya resolusi konflik yang bertanggung jawab. Nah, ini juga menggambarkan bagaimana kita fokus dan berkomitmen terhadap aspek HAM. Nah, selain itu, kami juga mengadopsi UN Guiding Principle on Business and Human Rights. Kami merasa ini penting karena ini menjadi panduan bagaimana kami mengimplementasikan penghormatan HAM tersebut. Nah, dari berbagai komitmen yang ada tersebut, kami menerjemahkannya ke dalam berbagai kebijakan dan prosedur, dan ini juga mengacu kepada peraturan, perundangan, dan juga standar global yang ada. Nah, kebijakan-kebijakan yang ada seperti kebijakan kesejahteraan karyawan atau employee welfare policy, kemudian juga kebijakan terkait tanggung jawab sosial perusahaan, corporate social responsibility, kemudian kebijakan terkait kesehatan, keselamatan kerja, dan juga kebijakan pengadaan dan pembelian bahan baku yang di dalamnya juga memperhatikan, mengutamakan penghormatan terhadap HAM, dan juga kami menerapkan kode etik bisnis, code of conduct. Nah, ini semua ditujukan sejalan dengan tujuan pembangunan Indonesia maupun tujuan pembangunan global yang kita kenal dengan SDGs, tadi sudah disampaikan juga oleh itu semua komitmen yang kami terapkan dan juga kami tanamkan di dalam bisnis kami, Desi.
Iya, terima kasih. Ini komitmen memang harus diterapkan, diimplementasi, tapi harus ada hasil juga. Mungkin Bu Sera, selama ini, apalagi kan Sinarmas sebagai perusahaan yang besar dan juga lingkungan hidup itu merupakan salah satu penting yang harus dijadikan prioritas. Bagaimana tantangan terbesar khususnya di lapangan, Bu Sera. Dan juga mungkin masa COVID ini kan bisa dijadikan semacam inilah peluang untuk memperbaiki apa-apa saja yang selama ini masih perlu diperbaiki. Silakan.
Iya. Terima kasih Mbak Desi. Sebelum masuk ke tantangan, mungkin kami akan eksplor sedikit tentang implementasi dari kebijakan dan komitmen tadi ya. Jadi yang pertama, bagaimana kami mematuhi peraturan perundangan dan juga standar terkait penghormatan HAM yang di dalamnya banyak juga terkait dengan aspek ketenaga kerjaan gitu. Nah, hal ini tidak hanya berlaku untuk EPP secara langsung, tapi juga bagi mitra-mitra yang memiliki hubungan bisnis dengan kami, termasuk para supplier, kemudian kontraktor maupun pihak ketiga lainnya. Nah, kemudian juga tidak ada toleransi terhadap diskriminasi, baik dalam hal gender, etnis, agama maupun ras. Kemudian juga tidak ada toleransi terhadap kerja paksa atau mempekerjakan anak di bawah umur. Jadi ini kita sangat strict dengan kebijakan maupun implementasinya di lapangan. Kemudian tadi mengedepankan upaya kesehatan, keselamatan, dan keamanan kerja. Dan juga kami memberikan kebebasan bagi karyawan untuk berorganisasi, dalam hal ini contohnya adanya serikat pekerja. Kemudian juga peluang yang sama bagi para karyawan untuk menempati posisi manajemen tanpa membedakan seperti itu. Kemudian kami juga melakukan upaya gap assessment untuk melihat bagaimana implementasi penghormatan HAM dilakukan di bisnis kami. Hal ini bisa dilakukan secara internal melalui proses internal audit dan juga adanya external audit dengan melibatkan pihak ketiga. Dan hal ini selanjutnya kami kelola menjadi proses monitoring dan evaluasi. Selain itu terkait human right due diligence, kami juga telah melakukan uji tuntas HAM atau HRDD ini dengan melibatkan pihak ketiga. Dan saat ini kami akan melakukan lagi tahap berikutnya dengan melibatkan pihak ketiga. Kemudian dari berbagai proses assessment dan juga inisiasi bagaimana melihat kondisi yang ada, kami juga melakukan penyempurnaan terhadap prosedur ataupun instruksi kerja dan juga penyelarasan dengan standar yang ada. Nah, di sisi lain, perlu adanya juga upaya peningkatan kesadaran dan kapasitas karyawan. Ini dapat dilakukan melalui training dan sosialisasi, dan juga kami berpartisipasi aktif dalam berbagai platform pembelajaran yang berfokus kepada topik penghormatan HAM, seperti salah satu contohnya adalah Consumer Good Forum. Di dalamnya ada koalisi tersendiri berkaitan dengan HAM, begitu ya, Human Rights Coalition, dan juga ada kerja-kerja yang diinisiasi dalam working group-nya, yaitu Human Rights Due Diligence Working Group, dan juga beberapa inisiatif dari kelompok kerja lain seperti Business and Human Rights Working Group di IGCN dan juga IBCSD sebagaimana berbagai forum yang kami ikuti. Nah, selain itu juga kami mendukung program pemerintah terkait dengan penghormatan HAM ini yang baru saja di-launching oleh pemerintah, adanya Prisma sebagai sebuah tool untuk melakukan uji tuntas HAM secara self-assessment. Nah, di samping itu kami juga berupaya memberikan informasi terkait hal-hal yang sudah kami lakukan melalui sustainability report kami maupun dashboard yang kami sediakan terkait aspek sustainability, dan dalamnya terdapat aspek-aspek penghormatan HAM. Nah, terkait dengan kondisi pandemi yang ada saat ini, kita tidak pungkiri bahwa berbagai dampak muncul kemudian terjadi, tetapi tadi sudah disampaikan walau bagaimanapun bisnis harus mampu meresponnya dengan cara positif seperti itu. Jadi kalau dalam konteks penghormatan HAM, kami merasa tidak ada perbedaan antara sebelum pandemi maupun sesudah pandemi, tetapi bagaimana pendekatan yang dilakukan ini akan menjadi berbeda. Begitu. Bagaimana kita menanamkan nilai-nilai prinsip-prinsip penghormatan HAM tadi saat ini harus bertransformasi kepada teknologi gitu. Kita melakukan proses-proses sosialisasi atau awareness bagi karyawan dengan secara online. Kemudian penghormatan itu sendiri dilakukan dengan adanya proses working from home maupun working from office yang kombinasi, dan ini memberikan kesempatan bagi karyawan kami juga untuk meminimalisir risiko yang ada. Kemudian sudah barang tentu tadi proses-proses bagaimana mensupport karyawan untuk tetap dalam kondisi yang baik begitu, adanya upaya-upaya vaksin, kemudian pemberian support untuk obat-obatan bagi karyawan yang juga memang terdampak secara langsung dalam pandemi ini. Nah, dari situ kami merasa dari pengalaman yang ada selama ini, tantangan yang masih perlu menjadi fokus perhatian bersama adalah rasanya terkait kurangnya pemahaman dan komitmen tentang penghormatan HAM ini dari berbagai stakeholders. Jadi tidak hanya di internal, termasuk juga berkaitan dengan hubungan kita dengan stakeholder yang lain. Jadi kami merasa untuk perlunya upaya-upaya peningkatan kapasitas, baik berupa sosialisasi, kemudian training, ataupun proses-proses pembelajaran dengan adanya berbagai platform, dan salah satunya seperti yang sudah diinisiasi oleh IBCSD, salah satunya forum ini, dan juga nanti akan dilanjutkan dengan training. Nah, ini kami menyambut baik upaya-upaya ini sehingga akan dirasakan manfaatnya, pertama bagi dunia bisnis, bagaimana kita mampu mengimplementasikan prinsip-prinsip dasar dari penghormatan HAM ini. Dan juga kami merasa adanya perlu inisiasi-inisiasi baik dari pemerintah maupun dari asosiasi bisnis, bagaimana kita memahami tentang peraturan perundangan yang ada, kemudian bagaimana menginisiasi atau mendevelop sebuah panduan yang bisa dipahami secara bersama-sama sehingga efektivitas dari implementasi penghormatan HAM ini akan berjalan dengan baik. Demikian Mbak Desi.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Sera. Ini pasti Bu Sera sebagai sustainability compliance. Ini salah satu yang sangat berat ya bagi sebuah perusahaan besar seperti APP Sinarmas, karena kunci dari semua ini adalah compliance, dan ini harus betul-betul dilaksanakan oleh semua shareholders dan stakeholders. Terima kasih sekali lagi. Sekarang Ibu Evi Yulin. Bu Evi dari PT Merck Indonesia, ini sebuah perusahaan obat-obatan yang terbesar di dunia. Silakan, bagaimana, apa saja yang dilaksanakan selama ini, khususnya komitmen untuk menerapkan best practices di PT Merck dan juga kaitannya dengan businesses and human rights, dan tentu saja dalam kerangka SDGs juga. Silakan, Bu Evi.
Baik, Mbak Desi, terima kasih buat kesempatannya. Mungkin saya sedikit ingin memperkenalkan dulu ya apa itu Merck gitu ya. Merck itu adalah perusahaan sains. Ya, Merck itu adalah perusahaan sains dan teknologi dari Jerman. Jadi kami itu berdiri tahun 1668. Jadi usia Merck saat ini sudah lebih dari 350 tahun, tepatnya 353 tahun ini. Dan kami tersebar di 66 negara di seluruh dunia. Dan secara general tujuan kami adalah memberikan manfaat yang bermakna bagi semua pemagangan, termasuk juga community kita. Usia kami, Merck Indonesia, tahun ini kita masuk ke usia 51 tahun. Jadi cukup lama juga kita sudah berada di Indonesia dan merupakan salah satu perusahaan farmasi tertua di dunia dan juga di Indonesia. Nah, komitmen kami menjawab pertanyaannya Mbak Desi tadi adalah, mungkin saya ingin sedikit kasih background bahwa Merck itu kita telah mendukung United Nations Global Compact itu sejak tahun 2005. Jadi prinsipnya yang mencakup hak asasi manusia, standar perburuan lingkungan, dan anti korupsi, itu semua prinsip itu sudah kita capture dalam Merck Charter sendiri. Jadi Merck juga mendukung hak asasi manusia sebagai bagian yang tidak terpisahkan dari sustainability principles kita. Nah, bisnis kami lakukan atas dasar etika yang kuat, yang selalu menjadi bagian integral dari budaya perusahaan kami dan tercermin juga dalam values kami, yaitu courage, achievement, responsibility, respect, integrity, dan juga transparansi. Di Merck ini kami semua mulai dari manajemen puncak, ya, manajer, karyawan sampai kontraktor itu memiliki tanggung jawab untuk bertindak dengan cara menghormati hak asasi manusia sebagaimana diuraikan dalam Merck Human Rights Charter yang ada di slide ini. Jadi charter ini sebenarnya menyatukan dan melengkapi aspek terkait hak asasi manusia dari peraturan dan pedoman Merck yang lainnya juga, seperti kami punya code of conduct, kebijakan lingkungan, health and safety policy, security policy. Jadi semua tercapture menjadi satu. Nah, kami mengutamakan proses human rights due diligence dimanapun kami beroperasi. Jadi dalam setiap aspek life cycle operasional kita, yang kami utamakan adalah human rights due diligence. Dan area spesifik yang menjadi prioritas kami adalah seperti yang tertulis di slide ini. Jadi ada 9 prioritas kami. Yang pertama adalah akses kesehatan, karena kami adalah pharma industri, jadi buat kami akses kesehatan menjadi hal yang paling penting, di mana semua orang mendapatkan high quality safe health solutions, dan juga kita juga respect to the right to health. Dan yang kedua adalah bribery dan corruption. Ini adalah prioritas kita juga. Dan yang ketiga adalah communities. Jadi kita juga harus make sure bahwa community, terutama di lingkungan kantor, di lingkungan pabrik kami juga mendapatkan kesamaan hak. Dan yang saya rasa di semua juga ada, yaitu adalah privacy, dan yang terpenting buat kami karena kami memproduksi obat ya, obat resep, pengawasan produk ya, atau product stewardship. Kenapa? Karena ini sangat penting karena obat itu harus diawasi dengan baik dari sisi side effect-nya, dari sisi penggunaannya. Jika obat digunakan dengan benar, insya Allah tidak akan ada jadi masalah. Tetapi bagaimana kami sebagai perusahaan memastikan bahwa dari sisi produk informasinya, dari sisi packagingnya, tidak terjadi counterfeit atau tidak terjadi penyalahgunaan produk, kemudian produk informasi harus selalu diupdate, itu merupakan salah satu prioritas kami juga. 6 research ethics, di mana pada saat kami melakukan research, kita harus mengikuti code of ethics atau peraturan-peraturan yang ada di setiap negara, sehingga tidak terjadi pelanggaran etika. Dan prioritas berikutnya adalah security, tadi supply chain juga sudah dibahas oleh pembicara sebelumnya, dan yang terpenting adalah workplace, ya, terutama dalam era pandemik ini ya. Jadi ada beberapa prioritas turunannya dalam workplace ini, yaitu kebebasan berserikat, tidak ada tenaga kerja paksa atau tidak ada tenaga kerja anak, tidak ada diskriminasi, dan juga equal opportunity, kesehatan dan keselamatan kerja. Nah ini kita charter ini sebenarnya, tapi karena keterbatasan waktu, mungkin saya kalau diperbolehkan mau share 2 hal sebagai best practice sharing, khususnya terkait hak asasi manusia di tempat kerja, karena mungkin ini sangat relate dengan tema kali ini dan juga relate dengan kondisi pandemik. Yang pertama ingin saya share adalah prioritas kami atas tidak adanya diskriminasi dan equal opportunity. Dan yang kedua, nanti kami akan share prioritas kami dalam hal kesehatan dan keselamatan di tempat kerja, khususnya di masa pandemik seperti sekarang, apa saja yang telah kita lakukan buat karyawan kita. Nah, mungkin saya masuk ke yang pertama, bisa dilihat di slide ini juga. Merck itu sangat tidak mentolerir diskriminasi berdasarkan jenis kelamin, ras, warna kulit, kebangsaan, usia, apalagi ya, agama, kecacatan, atau atas dasar lain apapun yang selama ini dilarang oleh hukum. Jadi kami merekrut, kami mempekerjakan, dan kami pada saat yang bersamaan juga mentrain dan mempromosikan karyawan berdasarkan prinsip-prinsip ini. Nah, seperti yang dapat dilihat dalam slide ini, ada beberapa fokus aktivitas yang sudah kami lakukan untuk mempromosikan diversity and inclusion di tempat kerja. Bahkan kami memiliki kegiatan tahunan yang kami namakan Diversity Days, di mana pada saat itu semua orang berkumpul, bisa sharing ya, ada expert juga yang kita undang gitu. Temanya semua berkaitan dengan diversity. Nah, salah satu fokus yang kita lakukan bukan hanya di Merck Indonesia, tapi secara global kita meng-highlight masalah women in leadership. Mungkin Mbak Desi familiar banget. Gender dalam posisi kepemimpinan itu akan mengarah pada kinerja perusahaan yang lebih baik. Dan ini yang telah kita implementasikan di Merck, karena buat kita adalah keseimbangan gender ini sangat diperlukan, dan kami sangat yakin bahwa ini akan memberikan hasil yang lebih baik. Tadi Pak Yono juga cerita, yang terpenting buat perusahaan apa sih, bottom line gitu ya. Jadi diharapkan dengan terjadinya keseimbangan ini, kinerja akan baik, outcome-nya juga akan lebih baik. Sekedar share aja, karena kita sudah mengimplementasikan ini beberapa tahun, Mbak Desi. Jadi secara global, Ratio women in leadership di Merck itu meningkat setiap tahunnya dengan kita melakukan fokus pada program ini. CEO Merck Group di Jerman itu perempuan juga, namanya Belen Garijo, ya. Beliau sering diundang di mana-mana, cukup tough, cukup kuat ya orangnya. Dan di Asia Pasifik sendiri leadership timnya itu sudah quite balanced, 50% male, 50% female. Nah, lalu bagaimana di Indonesia? Nah, alhamdulillah kesetaraan gender di Indonesia dalam kepimpinan telah terrepresentasikan dengan baik, Mbak Desi. 40%
iya, buktinya
male,
Bu Evi sendiri ya.
alhamdulillah
Sebagai salah satu contoh.
saya bisa dipercaya ya Mbak Desi untuk di sini, dan ini multinational company, jadi bukan hanya wanita tapi juga mempercayakan kepada orang Indonesia untuk memimpin ini.
Iya. Bu Evi mungkin masih ada satu dua ya. Dua menit lagi mungkin pertanyaan saya ini kan kalau Merck ya inilah perusahaan multinasional pasti dengan compliance-nya itu harus sangat-sangat penting dan diterapkan, tapi kan kita khususnya Merck di Indonesia kita bekerja dengan lingkungan atau budaya dan hal lain yang berbeda. Tantangannya apa? Dan apalagi sebagai seorang presidir mungkin yang perempuan ya dalam hal ini, apa saja kira-kira yang selama ini dihadapi? Tapi juga mungkin ini merupakan sesuatu yang sangat positif karena menjadi role model yang sangat baik dan harus diikuti oleh perusahaan-perusahaan lain menurut saya.
Ya, terima kasih Mbak Desi. Jadi tantangannya sebenarnya kalau bicara tadi di Women in Leadership itu sebenarnya ada bermacam-macam. Yang pertama adalah bagaimana kita bisa mengubah mindset akan equal opportunity untuk semua gender. Dan yang kedua, basicnya tuh kalau orang Indonesia, kalau misalnya saya meeting di global atau di regional gitu kan, orang Indonesia cenderung lebih banyak diam, apalagi wanita. Jadi perempuan itu suka ragu menyuarakan keinginan, atau kita sebutnya don't speak up gitu ya. Jadi mungkin ini yang sekarang tantangan yang terjadi, dan work-life balance bagi perempuan terutama di area pandemik ini amat sangat challenging ya. Saya banyak sekali mendapat masukan. Saya sendiri juga merasakan ya, karena kita di rumah, jadi kita dari pagi udah mikirin nanti makan siang buat keluarga apa nih ya, makan malam apa ya gitu. Udah biasanya kan kita di kantor ya masing-masing gitu. Nah, contoh-contoh seperti itu. Oleh karena itu kami membangun yang kita namakan I Will. Jadi I Women in Leadership, di mana itu komunitas karyawan Indonesia yang terus mempromosikan kesetaraan gender dan diberi kesempatan semua orang untuk berdiskusi, sharing pendapatnya dan juga sharing problemnya. Nah, kalau bicara mengenai tantangan yang lain itu adalah pada saat pandemik ini, Mbak Desi, ini benar-benar nggak pernah ada roadmap-nya, tidak pernah punya plan ya, tapi alhamdulillah kami bisa melewati ini semua inisiatif dan program yang kami lakukan. Mungkin sama dengan perusahaan lain ya, kami melakukan protokol keselamatan terutama untuk di pabrik nih Mbak Desi, karena orang pabrik ini kan harus tetap bekerja untuk memastikan produksi obat berjalan untuk kepentingan pasien. Jadi kami juga melakukan pembagian, juga ada yang bekerja dari rumah, di mana kami sediakan laptop dan akses internet, tes antigen dan PCR reguler, dan kami juga menggunakan program vaksinasi buat employee kita, dan alhamdulillah reaching 90% employee kita sudah tervaksinasi. Dan ada insentif COVID juga nih buat karyawan-karyawan kita karena resiliennya mereka. Ada juga employee assistance program kita bikin karena pasti semua orang stres. Jadi kita memberikan kesempatan mereka untuk call at any time for themselves and also for the family untuk menyampaikan problem-problemnya mereka. Nah, dampak dari program ini sangat baik Mbak Desi karena alhamdulillah tidak ada klaster di kantor kami, tidak ada klaster COVID di area kantor, dan kami terjadi penurunan kasus COVID yang pada karyawan yang cukup signifikan karena kami juga punya yang namanya in-house teleconsultation, in-house clinic ya, yang untuk membantu karyawan. Pada saat Juli kemarin mungkin peak-nya ya di mana semua teleconsultation rumah sakit penuh, alhamdulillah karena kami punya in-house, jadi semua bisa teratasi dengan baik. Jadi challenge-nya kalau dari sisi COVID ini adalah bagaimana menjaga karyawan sungguh-sungguh menjalankan protokol kesehatan di luar tempat kerja Mbak Desi, justru bukan di tempat kerja, karena di tempat kerja insya Allah cukup baik. Begitu Mbak Desi.
Iya, terima kasih Bu Evi, ini luar biasa bisa dijadikan contoh best practice, dan kalau saya lihat dari semua industri yang terdampak pada pandemi COVID-19 ini justru mungkin perusahaan-perusahaan yang mendalami atau menggeluti bidang kesehatan, bidang teknologi, bidang all digital dan lain sebagainya adalah yang naik daun. Jadi Menurut saya ini sangat-sangat menarik. Sekali lagi terima kasih, dan terima kasih juga 5 speaker kita sudah memberikan insight-nya terhadap business and human rights practices. Saya lihat belum ada pertanyaan yang diajukan lewat chat. Mungkin ini masih ada kesempatan karena waktu kita masih ada sekitar 20 menit lagi. Silakan kirim pertanyaan Anda lewat chat, nanti kita akan bahas, tapi karena masih belum ada, setahu saya ada dari the representative, a participant from the German government, Herr Maximilian Mauer. Do we have you on video?
Yes, I think
hear
we
that.
have.
Yes, I'm told that you would like to pick up on some of these issues. So go ahead. So what do you think of the discussion so far?
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. I hope you hear me.
Yes,
thank you very much
loud and clear.
Speakers. Actually, my Bahasa is still not that good, so I didn't get all of your messages, but thank you very much. However, I was asked. Actually, I'm the economic counselor in the German embassy, and I was asked by the organizing parties to participate today to speak about the German Supply Chain Act that has been adopted recently in June 2021 in Germany, because it, from political side, it fits perfectly to what we're talking about today. So from our point of view, this Supply Chain Act is pioneering because it sets a new standard, at least in our country. And therefore, we would like to share some insights on what it's talking about in order to have some fruitful discussions in the future on that topic. So I think I just joined because I had another meeting before, so I didn't hear all of your discussions. But let me wrap up where we come from in Germany when it comes to this act. We have the UN guiding principles. Mr. Santarrea obviously has shared some insights in the history and the ongoing process when it comes to the UN guiding principles. For us in Germany, this was a starting point for our engagement in business and human rights affairs that just recently concluded in our new Supply Chain Act. So the guiding principles, from our point of view, they were a major step forward when it comes to international acknowledgement of corporate human rights due diligence. So they translated responsibility to respect human rights into concrete management action in corporations. So after we all agreed on the UN guiding principles, all states were asked to implement them. So what did we do in Germany? Actually, we concluded in adopting this new act. But before that, there has been other major steps that lead to the Supply Chain Act now. So in 2016, we adopted a national action plan. Back then, it was a balanced approach, underlining the voluntary character of implementation of this plan for corporations. So that was set in 2016, and then from 2018 to 2020, we did a monitoring, national action plan monitoring to check how the corporates voluntarily implemented the UN guiding principles in their business. Unfortunately, when this evaluation was done in 2020, we figured out that just a minority of companies had managed to meet the targets and the government set. And that is why our Federal Chancellor Angela Merkel mandated the Parliament in 2020 to draft a law to create a binding framework when it comes to business and human rights. So now we have the law, as I just said, adopted just recently, 3 months ago. And what does it say? The aim of our Supply Chain Act is to enhance the respect for human rights in business relations throughout the whole supply chain. And of course, the second aim and an important aim as well is to take the legitimate interests of corporates in legal scrutiny when it comes to business and human rights into account as well. So the law says, in order to ensure human rights, it says companies with national, international companies with branches in Germany have to stick to that law. That means from 2023 onwards, companies with more than 3,000 employees will have to comply with the law. And from 2024 onwards, companies with more than 1,000 employees have to comply to the law. That is currently a number of almost 5,000 companies in Germany. So it's a huge impact we have here. And as I already said, it includes foreign branches in Germany as well. To cut it short, I don't have that much time, I was said. So to cut it short, when it comes to the topic, to the content of this law, companies must meet requirements that are tiered in a way, but these requirements are or cover the whole supply chain. That means the company's own business operations, direct suppliers, and also indirect suppliers. So there are a lot of rules, requirements that have to be complied with when it comes to risk analysis, risk management, grievance mechanism, etc.
So just very quickly before I'll let you go, Max, is this something that companies going to like welcome with open arms? Great, here is something else that we need. Or what's their feedback? I mean, what's their take on it? Are they happy, or they think it's just another one of those hoops they have to jump through?
Yeah, of course. Originally, before entering the Federal Foreign Office, I come from private business world. So obviously, I know they're not very happy about more administrative character, more administrative laws, of course. But however, we had fruitful discussions, a multi-stakeholder process leading to the adoption of this law. So we integrated all perspectives, even from business side, to align interests. And in the end, everybody knows that this law is very important to ensure human rights in Germany and globally. So we continue our close discussions with business to help them to implement the new requirements they face.
Yeah. So what happens after 2023? The companies who don't comply, they get penalties, or
there will be authorities checking how the companies comply with the law. Of course, there will be situations when these federal authorities will discover companies or suppliers, direct suppliers that do not comply with the law. There is a possibility to implement fines as well. But I mean, it's still, we are still in 2021. It's still way to go until the law takes force, and there are still discussions ongoing, even when it comes to the sanctuary mechanisms.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you.
I would like
thank you very much. Yeah.
Last statement. I would like to highlight to all of you who participate today. In case you have any questions, any interest in this topic, please feel free to contact me whenever you need to clarify on this new law.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Max, for your input. And I think I don't see any questions yet on the chat. So Livia, let's get back to you, because I think Max raised some really interesting points. You know, when it comes to implementing these guiding principles on businesses and human rights, I mean, there's the states and there's also the businesses, and there is, you know, everybody else, the civil society, the NGOs, and how, Livia, I hope you're still there.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, you know, after you've listened to the presentations, and obviously we know that businesses, they have their CSR, and also they also want to look good, but the due diligence is of course important. But the role of the state in this, the relationship between the you know, regulators and the implementers, especially if, for example, in Germany 2023 everybody has to comply with this UNGP. You know, how should it be done? Should there be, you know, incentives, punishments, rewards, some kind of system that gets everybody really, you know, on board with this commitment?
Yeah, Great question. Thank you. I'll be brief and starting by saying that I'm very impressed about the presentations of those who have, the CEOs and other senior managers who presented today. But my reflection was also that we know there are many more companies in Indonesia that are nowhere near these great these great approaches that we've heard today, great human rights policies, human rights due diligence. So here is the problem, that probably still the largest part of the Indonesian companies are not nearly as prepared as these companies that have spoken today. So there is a need for the government to step in, indeed, and set policies, okay? Policies that eventually also end up leveling the playing field, because these companies that spoke today that are more forward-looking are introducing approaches that are also costly for them, and they don't want to give undue advantage to those who are still taking shortcuts, right? So here is where the government fills the gaps. The government realizes that there is a trade issue. So not just business to business, but there is an actual trade issue between Indonesia and the EU, and sets policies for the entire country. The strategy that was referred to today, to me, is the most powerful instrument that the government should come in. But the strategy needs to be paired with two things. One, making companies aware of business and human rights. Second, helping them in being able to respond to those needs. So I go back to the issue of capacity, because again, I think the number of companies that have both awareness and capacity is growing. We've seen some great example today. The number of those who are aware is growing, still a long way to go. The number of those that are capacitated to do that, to keep communicating with European companies, is still very small. So here's where the government needs to come in. Set policies, make it clear to everyone that expectations apply to everyone, and then help giving instruments to these companies to respond to those requirements that the government will set as policies. And to answer to a question which wasn't asked, but it's the immediate one, should the government of Indonesia immediately jump on mandatory norms as well? I think that this going towards mandatory is something that happens in increments, right? Also in Germany, as it was explained by Mark, they first started with the NAP, National Action Plan, soft policies. It worked only to an extent, but it prepared the scenario for mandatory norms to come in. So I actually think that the whole world hopefully is going towards what Germany and the EU in general are anticipating, but it will happen in increments. So the first step is definitely the one of setting policies through the strategic plan. Okay. And then again, is a government action to be taken.
Yeah, okay, Olivia, very important point here. Maybe I'd like to get your quick thoughts from our speakers. Mungkin dari Pak Yono, kalau misalnya komitmen ini dijadikan keharusan, dan ya memang salah satu dari tujuan dari webinar ini adalah untuk meningkatkan awareness, meningkatkan kepedulian ya terhadap pentingnya melakukan mainstreaming terhadap human rights dan juga best practices di businesses. Bagaimana menurut Pak Yono, apa yang kira-kira yang harus dilakukan oleh pemerintah dan apa yang diharapkan oleh bisnis?
Oke, pertama-tama sebetulnya kalau dari sektor bisnis setiap kali ada tambahan requirement compliance itu ada tambahan cost.
Jadi beban ya.
Ya beban. Nah, jadi sebetulnya bukannya nggak mau ya, tapi karena ada tambahan beban. Dan di bisnis is very simple. Kalau kita ada investasi tambahan ya harus ada return on investment justification-nya, itu yang jadi pegangan. Tapi gini, ini ada namanya ISO 26000 yang terkait dengan social responsibility, yang saya kira social responsibility ini banyak perusahaan sekarang di Indonesia udah sadar dan melakukan hal mulai dari kegiatan filantropi sampai ke inklusif ekonomi. Nah, ada beberapa hal saya kira yang bisa dilakukan oleh pemerintah, yaitu mendorong badan-badan sertifikasi untuk memberikan layanan yang bagian daripada cost-nya itu dipegang sama pemerintah. Jadi artinya pemerintah memastikan kalau industri ini akan comply, Untuk itu dia harus mendorong bagaimana cara measurement ini dilakukan. Nah, kalau pemerintah bisa memberikan insentif di situ, saya kira banyak yang voluntarily. Hal ini pernah dilakukan untuk sertifikasi halal, Mbak Desi. Banyak perusahaan, restoran-restoran yang bergerak di bidang makanan, ya, jasa boga, yang kemudian mengambil inisiatif itu karena cost-nya sebagian besar ditanggung pada saat itu, gitu ya. Nah, kalau ini bisa dilakukan, saya kira sebetulnya apa yang diharapkan ini bisa cepat terlaksana, dan lagi sertifikasi itu adalah bagian daripada barrier to trade. Nah, sehingga juga buat industri nggak ada pilihan tuh, kalau memang harus certify, dia harus certify. Saya kira itu yang bisa saya usulkan. Terima kasih.
Ya, baik. Mungkin Mbak Anna, are you free to answer?
Yes,
so
yes,
what do you
yes.
think? Is this going to be just another burden, another sort of cost there, or are you in agreement that this should be made mandatory in Indonesia?
Okay, so do you mind if I give everyone the holistic view of what Livio has mentioned about Indonesia, as well as competitive advantage, why Indonesia? It all comes down to calculations, right? Earlier, everyone, all the panels also mentioned about planet, profit, and people, planet, and profit, right? But the fairness is like this, because Pan Brothers is 97% export oriented. So we have to fight against the world, right? When we want to make a competitive products, right? I want to put it on that way, Livio. So what hurts me, I mean, let me be very, very frank with EU this time. What hurts me is we are being compared with Vietnam, for example, on the garment side. Yet we know that the freedom of speech, the labor union nurture, the way I understand the Indonesian company is not perfect, but we have freedom of speech such a way that we sometimes cannot even differentiate between hoax news or real news, right? Whether or not what's being inputted in the social media is indeed true. But what happened with China, what happened with Vietnam, it's not so, right? But why Vietnam has free trade agreement with EU and Indonesia not? So how can actually the world and Indonesia has incentivized all the companies to actually do a real actions, a real concrete actions as what you have suggested? This is not only about the government of Indonesia, right? This is also about the private sectors, how our competitiveness being measured, because we cannot, as a liberal country, as a country where we endorse free trade, where we endorse freedom of speech, likewise, the domestic part of Indonesia need to be competitive as well, right? To do so, I'm not saying that I disagree with human rights. I'm not saying that I disagree with everything that I have said.
We have a topic for another webinar.
No,
I think you raised some interesting points. But so in other words, yes or no? Yeah. All right. But you, in principle, you agree that human rights responsibility is very important. Okay.
Yeah, it needs to be stepped up, because not every company, like Livio has mentioned as well, understand what it takes. And actually, it doesn't take a lot to actually taking care of our employees, right? Because when we take care of our employees, actually, they really are very productive and efficient.
Okay. Thanks so much. Very interesting, but unfortunately time is short. I have to allow other speakers to have their say. Sarah, what are your thoughts on, is this going to be something that your company looks forward to if it has to be mandated, if it's mandated, and you have to, there's no choice, you have to comply?
Ya, terima kasih Mbak Desi. Tadi sudah disampaikan juga oleh Pak Yono, pasti apapun yang diberlakukan, baik mandatori ataupun nanti voluntary, ini pasti akan ada konsekuensinya, begitu ya, baik dari sisi pembiayaan maupun dari sisi structure of governance di konteks bisnis kita juga. Nah, bagi saya, bagaimanapun ini nanti akan diberlakukan, yang terpenting adalah bagaimana kesiapan semua stakeholder itu dalam menyambutnya. Pertama, mungkin dari sisi pemerintah harus juga mempersiapkan kejelasan dari peraturan perundangan yang berlaku dengan turunan-turunan yang diperlukan, misalnya bagaimana guidance-nya, kemudian bagaimana tata laksananya nanti itu dapat dilakukan. Dan hal ini semua perlu disosialisasikan, perlu disampaikan untuk dapat dipahami dengan pemahaman yang sama bagi stakeholder lainnya. Dalam hal ini kita berfokus pada bisnis. Jadi menurut saya ini positif dengan bagaimana kita menatanya, bagaimana kita mempersiapkan semua kesiapan dari stakeholder, mulai dari piranti, kebijakan, turunannya, kemudian kesiapan bisnis dalam memahami hal yang sama. Makanya tadi kami mengusulkan agar ada kerjasama, kolaborasi semua pihak dalam menginisiasi, meningkatkan pemahaman dan implementasi penghormatan HAM di dunia bisnis. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Bu Sera. Last but not least, Bu Evi, your perspective.
Ya, Mbak Desi, terima kasih. Sebenarnya gini, kita sama ya, begitu ada regulasi yang memang harus kita terapkan, otomatis pasti kita akan terapkan. Beberapa kali, kebetulan saya juga Vice Chairman di IPMG. IPMG itu adalah International Pharmaceutical Manufacturer Group, jadi asosiasi dari multinational pharmaceutical company yang ada di Indonesia. Kami selalu melakukan engagement activities terhadap policy maker, karena basically yes we will follow, tapi kita juga punya kesempatan untuk menjelaskan sebenarnya impact-nya akan seperti apa, terutama terhadap industri farmasi itself dan juga terhadap access to medicine buat masyarakat Indonesia. Jadi ada beberapa regulasi yang kami sarankan, ada baiknya sebelum diketok palu berdiskusi dengan beberapa stakeholders untuk memastikan bahwa yang keluar ini adalah akan memberikan akses to innovative medicine kepada semua orang, dan akibatnya masyarakat Indonesia akan mendapatkan kesehatan dan kualitas yang lebih baik. Jadi sudah pasti kita akan mengikuti, akan ada extra effort, akan ada juga ekstra biaya, dan juga kadang-kadang beberapa policy akan memperlambat penyediaan obat di pasaran. Jadi mungkin public-private partnership harus berjalan, public discussion sebelum policy diterapkan harus ada, sehingga kita bisa memberikan masukan yang alhamdulillah sekarang sudah mulai bisa berjalan ke arah situ. Dan tentu saja pada saat itu semua policy-nya sudah di-launch, ya, undang-undangnya sudah ada, perpresnya ada, yang pasti adalah juknisnya juga harus jelas, sehingga pada saat pelaksanaan tidak terjadi hambatan. Demikian Mbak Desi.
Baik, terima kasih banyak, dan saya lihat juga ini waktunya sudah berakhir. Sekali lagi terima kasih, tapi pada intinya apalagi dengan mengadakan diskusi seperti ini, we're all in agreement that businesses should be responsible to implement human rights, and also to be responsible to protect human rights, to respect human rights, to remedy against the human rights abuses. And I think this is something that we all agree on. And how we do that, of course, it's to educate and socialize particularly by the government as the main kind of duty actor to implement human rights in Indonesia, particularly. I think this will take time, and this is something that needs to be discussed further, and also for businesses and the governments and the regulators to actually sit down and work out what's best, so that it's not a burden, so that it is a commitment that everybody is happy to do, everybody is happy to implement. And of course, it's actually good, not just for the people, not just for the society, not just for the businesses, but for the planet which we occupy. Once again, thank you very much to our speakers for your time. Terima kasih. Pak Livio, terima kasih banyak. Pak Yono, Bu Ann, Bu Evi, Bu Sera, dan juga untuk IBCSD, terima kasih telah mengadakan acara ini. And what can I say except we are still in the midst of pandemic, so stay safe. Don't forget the COVID-19 is still within us. I always, before I say goodbye, I always say, don't forget to wear your mask, wash your hands, and also do your social distancing. And I hope best wishes and good luck for all your companies, for all your endeavors, and of course for the EU here, and also for the UNDP and all those watching. Very best wishes, good luck, and stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Terima kasih. Bye-bye. BCSD juga. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Oke, bye.
Terima kasih.
Mbak Desi.
Ya, bye-bye. Terima kasih.
Mbak Sarah, Bu Evi.
Terima kasih.
Pak Yono.
Sama-sama. Terima kasih, Pak. Saya izin live ya, Pak.
Ya, sama-sama, Bu.
Silakan Bu Evi.